Picture a city that eats itself, not metaphorically. Literally, actually. A city where the waste from one table is the main meal at another. Where the scraps of a nobleman's Thursday dinner keep a family alive on Friday. Where a haunch of mutton passes through 7 pairs of hands before anyone actually pays for it. And every one of those pairs of hands is a little more desperate than the last. Now fill that picture with this. A townhouse on South Audley Street, Mayfair, London, November 1762. 3 stories of pale brick, 8 windows across the front, a brass knocker polished every morning whether anyone uses it or not. Inside, on this particular Thursday, the cook is managing 40 covers, 40 plates, 40 seats at a table in the dining room upstairs, where the beeswax candles burning in the chandeliers cost more per dozen than a week's wages for the girl washing the pots in the scullery. That girl is 15 years old. Her name is Nell Pratt, and she has been in this kitchen since 4 in the morning. She will not eat the roast saddle of mutton going upstairs tonight. She will not eat the potted shrimps or the syllabubs shivering in crystal glasses, or the almond pastry that took 2 hours to construct. She will not eat the dressed crab, the venison haunch, the raised pies the size of hat boxes, the sugar sculpture 4 feet high that took Mrs. Hatch's daughter Ruth an entire afternoon to assemble. None of that is hers. None of that was ever going to be hers. She will eat what's left, what's scraped, what didn't sell, what made it out the back gate with a few coins changing hands and the understanding that nobody asks questions. This is how a significant portion of London ate in 1762. Not off their own tables, off everyone else's. Off the chipped edges and the second servings and the untouched dishes that got cold before anyone reached them. Off the bones and the dripping and the bread that went stale by Saturday morning. Off the generosity of cooks who had a system and the desperation of people who had nothing except the knowledge of where to stand and when. Add the smell of it. Tallow candles burning in 50 holders upstairs. The cheaper ones, made from rendered beef, giving off a smell that sits somewhere between cooking and slow rot. Coal smoke pouring from the range below. The thick, almost physical sweetness of meat that has been roasting at high heat since 6 in the morning. The sour, medicinal edge of old bones being boiled for the 2nd time in the stock pot, because nothing gets thrown away in this kitchen. You boil the bones until they surrender every particle of usefulness. Then you boil them once more. Then, maybe you sell them to the bone man. Add the noise. Copper pans banging against iron hooks. The cook, Mrs. Hatch, shouting orders that everyone already knows, because the shouting is not about information, it is about authority. It is about keeping 12 people moving in the same direction in a space the size of a large parlour. The hollow thud of pastry being turned on the board. The wheeze of the bellows being worked to keep the fire at roasting heat for the venison. The clatter of wooden-soled pattens against stone floor. The faint clink of crystal being polished upstairs with chamois leather by a footman who is not allowed to sneeze in the vicinity of the good glasses. And underneath all of that, so quiet you could miss it, the sound of people managing hunger, the way you learn to not quite look at a dish you're carrying, the particular stillness of a person who has been around food all day and is working very hard not to think about it, the discipline of serving plenty while you are empty. In any great house in England in 1762, this is one of the central and unspoken performances of daily life. Add one more thing before we go in. This is Mayfair, one of the most expensive squares of earth in England in 1762. Half a mile north the streets change completely. Half a mile north is 7 Dials, where people sleep 6 to a room, and children pick through the gutter mud for anything that might once have been edible. Half a mile, the same city, the same November air. I make these history stories, and honestly I have no idea whether you're listening to fall asleep, or whether you're the kind of person who's always wanted to know exactly how 18th century kitchen economics worked, and where a nobleman's leftovers went at the end of the night. Either way, you're here. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. For half a second, maybe less, the smallest gap of mercy, you've forgotten where you are. Some softer life is still hovering at the edge of consciousness. Warmth, maybe. A room that isn't stone. Your mother's voice. The fields outside the window in Hertfordshire going yellow in the autumn. Then it hits you. The smell. Not one smell. In this kitchen, it is never just one smell. It comes in layers, and after 7 months you have learned to read them the way a sailor reads the sky. First, coal. Always coal first, because the range is never fully cold, and the coal dust has worked its way into the walls and the rafters and your hair and the skin behind your ears. The smell of coal is the smell of this kitchen, and the smell of this kitchen is the smell of your entire world right now. Underneath that, tallow. Yesterday's tallow. The fat from the rendering pot that dripped down the side of the iron hob and burned in a thin layer and never quite cleaned off no matter how long you scrub at it with the brick. The smell is slightly sweet and slightly wrong. The way animal fat smells when it has been at heat. Underneath that, bones. Long-boiled bones from Tuesday's haunch of beef, which have been simmering in the stock pot since yesterday afternoon. Mrs. Hatch says good stock is the foundation of good cooking, and bones give and give and give until they give nothing more, and even then you don't throw them away, because the bone man comes on Fridays and pays a halfpenny per pound, and that halfpenny is Mrs. Hatch's to keep. Underneath all of that, underneath every professional smell of the kitchen, the smell of your own body. The girl who shares the pallet with you, Agnes, 12 years old, a kitchen maid 1 step below you on the ladder, is still pressed warm against your back. You can smell the coal dust on her hair. Welcome to the back kitchen of a Mayfair townhouse, London, November 1762. You're lying on a straw pallet 3 inches thick, on the flagstone floor of a room that is technically called the back kitchen, but that everyone in this house calls the scullery. The room is perhaps 8 feet by 10. Everything in it. The pallet you share with Agnes. A wooden rack for drying cloths. 2 wooden buckets for water hauling. A row of copper pots already cleaned from last night, hanging on hooks above the stone sink. The sink itself. A stone trough, cold and grey, that will be your main point of contact with the physical world for the next 15 hours. Your name is Eleanor Pratt, but no one here calls you that. You are Nell. You're 15 years old. You came to London from Hertfordshire 7 months ago with a letter of character written by the vicar's wife, which described you as a steady and industrious girl of good family, though reduced circumstances. The reduced circumstances part was doing a lot of work in that sentence. Your father is a farm labourer. Your mother takes in washing. There are 5 younger than you at home, and the letter from the vicar's wife and the position it secured were the best things that happened to your family in 3 years. You're paid £5 10 shillings per annum. That is approximately 5 shillings a month. It sounds like almost nothing. It is almost nothing, except it includes your food and your bed, such as they are. And in London in 1762 a bed and food together are never nothing. In London in 1762 plenty of people have neither. The church bells are already striking. Not just one church. You can hear 4 distinct sets of bells from here if the wind is from the west. St. George's, Hanover Square, is the nearest, practically in the garden. Its bells heavy and authoritative, the voice of an expensive church in an expensive neighbourhood. The bells of St. George's has been ringing over Mayfair since 1724, 4 o'clock. You've been in this kitchen long enough to know what 4 o'clock on a Thursday means. On an ordinary Thursday you might have had until 4:15 before Mrs. Hatch came down, but this Thursday is not ordinary. Tonight Lord and Lady Ashworth are giving a dinner, 40 covers, which means the day started approximately 10 minutes ago when you should have already been up. Agnes groans behind you, 12 years old, from somewhere in Surrey, still learning the mathematics of this life, still counting on more sleep than it allows. Agnes, 4 o'clock. Another groan, deeper this time. Agnes. She sits up, hair stuck to her face. In the faint ember glow from the range visible through the kitchen door, her eyes are barely open. Is it already? It's already. You don't wait. You swing your legs off the pallet and put your feet on the flagstone floor. The cold hits your bare soles like a thrown pan. Not surprising, not even shocking anymore after 7 months. But your body remembers every morning that this is wrong, that feet should not touch stone this cold before the sun is up, that there should be something between skin and ground. There isn't. Move. You pull on your dress in the dark. Not undress. You slept in your shift, but the dress over it, the plain brown wool you wear every working day, rough enough to scrape your arms through the sleeves. You tie your apron by feel, the knot you've made 500 times. You push your feet into your pattens, the wooden-soled overshoes that keep your feet off the perpetually wet scullery floor, and the clatter they make against the flagstone is so familiar by now that you barely register it. The kitchen is grey before you reach it. You go straight to the range. Fresh coal from the scuttle, then the bellows, working them steadily until the red spreads and brightens and the warmth starts to push back against the cold radiating from the walls. This is the first task of every morning without exception. Get the range going. Everything else depends on heat. The day cannot begin until the fire says it can. The kitchen itself is perhaps 30 feet by 20. Enormous by the only standards you knew before this. The farmhouse kitchen in Hertfordshire, which was comfortable and warm and 1/10 of this size. The range runs along one wall. 3 grates, 2 ovens, a boiling plate wide enough to hold 4 stock pots side by side. The preparation table runs down the centre, 12 feet of thick oak worn down by 30 years of chopping and rolling and hot pans being set down without a thought. Copper pots hanging from the rack above it, 60 or 70 of them, each polished to a dull working brightness. The dresser against the far wall holds the everyday china, not the good china, which lives upstairs in the plate cupboard under Mr. Good the butler's supervision. Mr. Good occupies a different dimension from you. His world is upstairs, in the dining room and the hall and the pantry and the family's private rooms. He manages Lord Ashworth's wines and his silver and his guests' arrivals. He employs 2 footmen and a hall boy, who exists in a state of permanent anxiety about everything. Mr. Good comes into this kitchen perhaps once a day, usually to confer with Mrs. Hatch about the day's menu, and when he does, the kitchen somehow becomes smaller and more careful until he leaves again. You have spoken to Mr. Good exactly 4 times in 7 months. Mrs. Hatch arrives at 4:15. You hear her before you see her. The particular footfall of a large woman who has spent 30 years in kitchens. Purposeful, evenly weighted, no wasted movement, no hesitation on the stairs. She comes down the back staircase in her grey working dress and her clean white apron, cap already pinned perfectly, expression already engaged with the day. Nell. She looks at the range, reads its condition in a single glance, nods once. Stock pot first. I want it simmering by 5. A pause. Agnes. She looks at Agnes, who's appeared in the doorway still half asleep, cap crooked. Scald the cream jugs, every one of them. This is Mrs. Hatch, 53 years old. Bristol-born, London-trained, in this particular kitchen for 11 years. A face that was probably striking once and is now professional, set permanently in the expression of someone managing the gap between what is expected and what is possible, and making it look easy. She is not warm exactly. She's not cold either. She's functional in the way that good tools are functional. Precise, reliable, not interested in being admired. She controls everything that enters and leaves this kitchen. Every piece of food, every scrap, every bone and dripping and piece of stale bread, including what the servants eat, including, crucially, what does not go upstairs. In any house in Mayfair in 1762, the cook holds a particular kind of power that no other servant holds. Not because she outranks the housekeeper or the butler in the formal hierarchy, she doesn't, but because she controls the food. And the food, when you understand how houses actually work, is where a surprising amount of everything ultimately concentrates. She controls which servant gets which portion. She controls what gets sold out the back and what gets kept. She controls the perquisites, the customary rights that servants have by long and unwritten tradition to certain parts of what they handle. The drippings from the roasting pans, the meat bones after the stock is made, the rendered fat, the stale bread, the leftover wine used in the cooking, the broken and imperfect items that will never make it to the table. These rights are not trivial. They are not officially wages. They are not written in any contract. But they are as real as anything else in the economics of a great house. And everyone knows it, and the household accounts are kept in a way that accommodates them without ever directly acknowledging them. A cook with good perquisites in a household that gives a great many dinners can effectively double her official wages. Sometimes more. You know this. You have been in this kitchen long enough to understand the outlines of how it works. Even if you don't yet understand all the details, you understand where you fit. You fit near the bottom. Mrs. Hatch puts a bowl of oatmeal in front of you at 6:15. No milk. The milk is spoken for. Cream sauces, syllabubs, the syllabubs alone requiring nearly 2 quarts. The oatmeal is thick and lukewarm. You eat it standing at the preparation table because there is not yet time to sit. There will not be time to sit again until perhaps 10 o'clock tonight, if you are lucky. You eat the oatmeal in large, efficient spoonfuls. You do not think about what is going up to the family later. You think about the stock pot, which needs skimming every few minutes, and about the fact that you need to get the copper warming pans from the cupboard by the scullery door and check whether any of them need retinning before tonight, and about Agnes's habit of scraping the roasting pans too hard and leaving scratches in the surface that Mrs. Hatch will notice and hold against you because you are nominally responsible for Agnes's work. You eat your oatmeal. This is your breakfast. This is what breakfast looks like here. Other members of the kitchen staff arrive between 5 and 6. Thomas, the upper footman, appears at 5:30, already dressed in his livery. Dark blue coat, white stockings, hair powdered, looking entirely too formal for the backstairs at 5 in the morning. He is 22 and handsome in a way that he's not quite unconscious of. He ducks under the lower ceiling beam with the automatic ease of long practice. He does not work in the kitchen. He will carry dishes upstairs tonight and stand behind Lord Ashworth's chair and refill glasses. He is not your responsibility. Mary, the senior kitchen maid, arrives at 5:45 and goes immediately to the bread dough that has been proving overnight in the covered bowl by the range. She is 21, been in service since she was 12, knows this kitchen the way some people know their own hands. She and you have an arrangement. You skim the stock without being asked, and she notices when you're close to drowning in pot washing and sends Agnes to help you. Not a formal arrangement, just the kind of thing that develops in a kitchen where survival requires it. Mrs. Hatch's daughter, Ruth, arrives at 6, carrying the notebook she keeps for dinner party days, a small leather-covered book where she writes down Mrs. Hatch's instructions in a clear round hand, crossing them off as each one is completed. Ruth is not in service. She comes in from her own lodgings in Pimlico on Thursdays and Fridays to help. She is paid separately. She and her mother have a relationship of complete professional trust and occasional disagreement, conducted entirely in looks, as if words are too imprecise for the kind of communication they require. By 6 o'clock the kitchen is in full motion. You're still skimming the stock. Here is something worth understanding about a great dinner in 1762. 40 covers does not mean 40 items of food. It means 40 versions of multiple courses, multiple removes, multiple dishes arranged symmetrically on the table for the guests to serve themselves and each other. This is called service à la Française, because the English aristocracy borrowed it from France the way they borrowed many things, which is to say they took it, improved nothing, and convinced themselves it was now English. What it means in practice is that no fewer than 20 dishes will appear on the table at once for each main course, arranged in the prescribed pattern, so that the visual symmetry pleases the eye of any guest who cares to notice it, which is most of them, because this is the Georgian upper classes and they care intensely about the visual presentation of their own prosperity. For this kitchen, 40 covers means 2 soups to start, 1 clear, 1 cream, a remove of the soup replaced by fish, turbot tonight, which has been sitting in the cold larder since Tuesday, because the fishmonger delivered it already, and Mrs. Hatch is watching it like a hawk. Then the main course, saddle of mutton, haunch of venison, a sirloin of beef, plus 6 entremets, side dishes, which tonight include braised celery, a ragout of mushrooms, stewed pears, fricassee of sweetbreads, potted shrimps and shells, and a dish of dressed crab that is giving Mrs. Hatch a quiet anxiety, because the cream in the sauce is not quite as fresh as she would like, and she's monitoring it by smell every half hour. Then the dessert remove, 4 syllabubs, 2 charlottes, a pyramid of preserved fruit, sugar paste flowers, pink and white, arranged on a mirrored salver, biscuits of 4 kinds, jelly set in copper moulds in the shapes of leaping fish, which have been chilling in the larder since Tuesday, and are beautiful, and will take approximately 3 minutes to be destroyed by a table of 40 people who are not particularly paying attention to them. None of this is yours. Let that be stated simply. It is not resentment. Resentment implies that you thought there was another possibility. This food is Lord Ashworth's. He has paid for it. He has paid for the kitchen that produces it, the range it was cooked on, the coal that fired the range, the servants whose hands made it, the copper pots they made it in. You understood the bargain before you arrived. The bargain is that you make this food, and in exchange you receive wages and shelter and food of a different, lesser, sufficient kind. What you did not fully understand before you arrived, what no one explains because everyone already knows, is the system that operates at the margins, not the bargain itself, the edges of the bargain, the places where the official transaction blurs into something older and less formal and considerably more interesting. That system is what today is actually about, not Lord Ashworth's dinner. What happens after? The morning passes in the particular way that cooking-heavy mornings pass, in a blur of heat and smell, and the specific exhaustion of physical work done at pace. By 8 o'clock the venison's on the spit, turned by James the kitchen boy, 9 years old, from somewhere near Lambeth, who sits on a stool by the range and turns the handle of the spit mechanism with the steady blank expression of someone whose mind is somewhere considerably more pleasant than a Mayfair kitchen on a November morning. By 9 o'clock the pastry cases for the raised pies are in the oven. By 10 the stock has been strained and set aside and the stock pot cleaned, and the process has begun again with a new set of bones. Your hands have been in cold water approximately 3 times since you woke up. The skin on your knuckles is cracked in 2 places where it has been wet, and then cold one too many times. You do not notice this anymore. Or you notice it the way you notice the cold floor under your feet, as information that your body registers and immediately discards because there is nothing to be done about it. At 9:30, Mrs. Hatch calls you to the preparation table. This happens rarely. Mrs. Hatch's direction of you is usually delivered across the kitchen in short sentences. Skim the stock, scrub the bread tins, carry that copper pan to the scullery. Being called to the table is different. Being called to the table usually means either that you've done something wrong or that you're about to be given something. She puts a piece of bread and a small pot of dripping in front of you. Dripping. The rendered fat from the roasting pans, collected, strained, allowed to solidify into a jar of cloudy white fat. This particular dripping is from yesterday's beef, so it is golden at the top and brown and jelly-like at the bottom, and the smell of it is the concentrated smell of roast beef, deep and meaty and full of the ghosts of the animal it came from. "Eat," says Mrs. Hatch. "I need you sharp this afternoon." You eat. Bread torn from the loaf, thick slices spread with dripping the way you spread it, thick enough to taste but not so thick you look greedy, because Mrs. Hatch is watching. The dripping is slightly salty and rich in a way that the plain oatmeal this morning was not, and the bread is from yesterday's baking but still good, and the combination is the most satisfying thing you have eaten in 3 days. This is something worth understanding about dripping, because dripping is not a small thing in 1762. It is not a condiment, it is a food. For a large portion of the London poor, it is one of the primary fats they have access to. You can buy it from cook shops and from the gates of great houses, sold off in small quantities, a halfpenny for a pot, a penny for a larger one. You can spread it on bread for meals that are otherwise only bread. You can use it to fry things in, to make things more caloric than they would be plain. In a diet built largely around bread and perhaps some oatmeal, and whatever vegetables are cheap at the market that day, dripping is energy. Fat is energy. Fat is warmth in a body that spends November in cold rooms. The dripping coming out of this kitchen tonight will be considerable. The venison haunch alone will render nearly a pint of fat as it roasts. The mutton saddle will give another pint. The beef sirloin more still. Some of this Mrs. Hatch will keep for the kitchen's own use, for frying the servants' food, for greasing the bread tins. Some of it will go into the small earthenware jars lined up on the shelf in the larder. Those jars have a destination that is not the upstairs table. You eat your bread and dripping and watch the kitchen and begin to understand the geography of this afternoon. At 10 o'clock, Mrs. Hatch speaks to you again. This time she comes to the scullery door and her voice is lower than usual, and she speaks in a way that suggests this is information rather than instruction. "Tonight," she says, "when we're clearing, you'll be at the back gate." She pauses, looks at you steadily. You know what that means. You know what it means. You have known for a month in theory because Mary explained it to you one evening in the language of someone explaining something so obvious it barely requires stating. In practice, you have not been at the gate yet. You have been considered too new, too young, too unfamiliar with the system to be trusted at the gate without instruction. Yes, Mrs. Hatch, you're fast, you're sensible. Tonight, I need someone reliable at the gate because I'll be managing the clearing in the dining room. She looks at you a moment longer, assessing. Any questions? You have 100 questions. You ask none of them. No, Mrs. Hatch. She returns to the kitchen. You stand in the scullery for a moment with your hands in the washwater, feeling the new weight of the evening. The gate economy, as you have come to think of it, though no one calls it that, no one calls it anything, is this. Great houses produce food waste at a rate that would be extraordinary even if London weren't London. A dinner for 40 covers generates not just the uneaten food on the table, but the untouched dishes, the dishes that weren't popular, the bread that was broken and set aside, the soup that made it upstairs but came back barely touched because the guests were already full from the first course. It generates the dripping from the roasting pans and the rendered fat from the beef and the mutton, and the bits of pastry and the broken sugar paste flours and the cracked jelly moulds and the biscuits that got slightly scorched on one side and weren't sent up at all. None of this is garbage. None of this is spoiled. Most of it was prepared this morning by skilled hands. It is simply surplus. The surplus of plenty, which is the only kind of surplus this neighbourhood produces. The back gate of this house faces onto the Mews Lane. The Mews Lane runs behind the terrace, past the carriage houses and the stables, through the perpetual smell of horse and hay, and the particular quality of mews air, which is better than the street air out front, but not by as much as you'd think. At the end of a dinner party night, people come to the back gate, not randomly, not desperately. They come because they know to come. Some of them have come every week for years. Some of them are servants from other houses sent by their own cooks with specific requests. Some of them are regular people from the streets north of here, the transition zone between Mayfair and the less expensive world beyond it. Some of them, the ones who've been coming longest, just appear at the right time with their bowls and their pots and their coins and their practised expression of neither hope nor need, the expression of someone who understands that what is happening here is a transaction and not a charity, and holds on to that distinction with both hands. What they buy or receive or exchange for small amounts of coin, the broken meat, the leftover food from the dinner table, the dripping, the bread, the things that have been prepared and are surplus. The cook controls the gate, who gets what, at what price, how much. This is part of the cook's perquisites, the customary rights of the position. In the official accounting of the household, it doesn't appear. It never appears. It is as real and as structured as any market transaction in the city, and as invisible as the people conducting it. Tonight you are going to learn how it works from the inside. The afternoon passes in the particular way that dinner party afternoons pass in this kitchen. which is to say at a pace that feels like controlled panic. Not chaos. Mrs. Hatch doesn't permit chaos. But the sensation of moving slightly faster than is comfortable for every minute of every hour, with consequences for stopping. At noon the jellies are unmoulded. 3 of the 4 come out perfect. Clean edges, no cracks, fish shapes in translucent amber. The 4th cracks along the tail, and Mrs. Hatch looks at it for a moment and says nothing and sets it aside on the shelf. And it will not go upstairs, and it will not be wasted either. At 1 o'clock the upstairs household has their midday meal, cold meats from yesterday's dinner, because there was a smaller dinner yesterday, a family dinner, just 8 covers, and bread and cheese and a preserved fruit tart that Ruth has made specifically for them. This meal is served in the dining room by Thomas and the younger footman, William, who is 17 and cannot be left alone with Crystal without supervision. You carry a tureen of soup up the back stairs for the family's meal. This is the first time today you've gone above the kitchen level. The back stairs are steep and narrow, and smell of the meals that have travelled up and down them for 3 decades. You carry the tureen with both hands on the curved handles, feeling the heat through the cloth you've wrapped around them, walking carefully, elbows in, because the staircase is just barely wider than a person with the tureen. At the top of the back stairs is a service door that opens into the main corridor of the ground floor. You push through it. The corridor is a different world. The smell changes first. Not coal smoke, not tallow, something lighter, beeswax, flowers, something that might be powder from a wig or might just be the smell of clean fabric in a warm room. The floor is not stone, it is polished wood, and the sound of your patterns on it is wrong, too loud, and you lift your feet slightly to soften each step without quite thinking about why. The corridor is 20 feet long and carpeted at the far end. 2 paintings on the wall. You don't look at them directly, you look past them, keeping your eyes on the dining room door ahead. The sconces on the wall are not lit in the daytime. Daylight comes through the window at the end of the corridor, and it falls on everything with a quality that is different from the kitchen daylight. Cleaner somehow, less interrupted, as if this end of the house receives a different variety of November sun. Thomas is already in the dining room arranging something on the sideboard. He looks at you as you come in with the tureen, takes it from your hands, sets it on the stand without comment. You're supposed to leave immediately. You do leave immediately. But you take 3 seconds to register the room. The dining room table is set for 8. White damask cloth, perfectly smooth. Silver candlesticks not yet lit, a centrepiece arrangement of hothouse flowers and some kind of late greenery, formal and symmetrical, and probably arranged by the housekeeper this morning before you were thinking about anything except the stock pot. The chairs are mahogany with pale green upholstered seats. The sideboard runs the length of the far wall, silver serving pieces set out on it in careful rows. This is the room where Lord and Lady Ashworth eat, not just tonight, every day, where they have eaten every day for the years they have owned this house, where tonight 40 guests will eat an 8-course dinner that cost approximately what your father earns in 3 years. 3 seconds. Then you turn and go back through the service door and down the back stairs to the kitchen. The rest of the afternoon is the roasting and the basting and the pastry finishing, and the jellies chilling and the sauces being made and remade and tasted and adjusted and made again, and you are part of the mechanism of it, but only the lower parts. The washing of pans, the carrying of water, the refilling of the coal scuttle, the steady attendance to the stock pot which now holds the base for 3 of tonight's sauces, and which needs to be at a consistent simmer without boiling, And maintaining that balance in a kitchen with 3 different fires burning at different temperatures is something that sounds simple and takes 8 weeks to learn to feel in your body. At 4:30, Mrs. Hatch stops. She's been moving continuously since 4:15 this morning, and she stops for 5 minutes and sits on the stool by the back window and drinks a cup of tea and eats a piece of bread and says nothing to anyone. No one speaks to her during these 5 minutes. Everyone understands that this pause is not a rest exactly, but a recalibration, a moment in which Mrs. Hatch takes stock of the evening ahead and decides what is missing and what is covered and what she's most worried about. She does this by sitting very still and drinking her tea and staring at a point slightly above the window frame. At 4:35 she stands up, puts down the cup and says, "Ruth, these sweetbreads need more salt. Mary, that pastry glaze is not right. Nell, more coal on the middle grate. James, stop staring at the fire and turn the spit." Everyone moves. The guests begin arriving at 6. You know this not from seeing them, but from hearing them. The front door opens and closes. The sound of carriage wheels on the cobblestones. Voices. Indistinct. Elevated. The particular vocal quality of people who expect to be listened to. Thomas's footsteps on the main staircase as he goes up and down, up and down. A bell in the kitchen corridor rings twice. That's the study, meaning Lord Ashworth wants something sent up. You don't go upstairs again. That is not your world tonight. Your world tonight is this kitchen, the flagstone floor, the copper pans, the 40-covered dinner, the scraping and washing and carrying. Your world is the temperature of the range and the smell of the venison turning, and the particular anxiety of a large kitchen in the last hour before service begins, when everything that can go wrong still theoretically can, and everyone knows it. At 6:50, Mrs. Hatch calls the servants' dinner. This is the meal that the kitchen and house servants eat together in the servants' hall before the main dinner goes upstairs. It is not a small meal. Mrs. Hatch believes, and this is not universal among cooks in Mayfair, not all of them hold this view, that servants who have been working since 4 in the morning need to eat properly before they spend another 4 hours on their feet. The servants' dinner tonight is a piece of the braised mutton from yesterday's family dinner, reheated with some of today's stock and 2 carrots, bread, a pot of mustard, a dish of cooked turnips. There is also a piece of hard cheese that has been sitting in the larder for 5 days and is starting to be emphatic about it, but is still perfectly edible. You eat this in the servants' hall with Agnes and Mary and James and William the young footman, who is nervous about the 40 covers and shows it by talking too much. Thomas eats quickly and goes back upstairs. Mrs. Hatch eats standing at the preparation table reading Ruth's notebook. The mutton is good. The stock has given the sauce a depth that reheating has made better rather than worse, and the carrots are properly done, soft enough to eat without effort, which matters when your hands are tired and your jaw is tired and you've been at physical work for nearly 15 hours. You eat all of it. You eat the bread and the turnips and the difficult cheese, and you think about nothing except eating. This is the servants' dinner. This is what that looks like. At 7:15, the first dishes begin going upstairs. Thomas and William carry the soup tureens. Mrs. Hatch herself carries the turbot. The raised pies go up on a great silver platter. The dining room bell rings and stops, rings and stops. From the kitchen, you can hear, faintly, through 2 floors and a great deal of plaster and timber, the sound of 40 people having dinner, not individual voices, a collective sound. The low, continuous roar of a large group of wealthy people doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is eating and talking and drinking Lord Ashworth's wine and feeling confident in their position in the world. You wash pots. This is what you do while they eat. The kitchen generates pots at a rate that would stagger anyone who had not seen it. Every sauce requires at least 2 pots, one for the making and one for the finishing. Every pastry item requires its tin. Every dish requires its serving piece, and the serving pieces come back down from upstairs as each remove is cleared, already scraped but still needing washing, and they have to be clean and dry and ready for the next remove, and there is no interval in which to breathe between one remove coming down and the next one going up. You work at the stone sink with Agnes beside you. The water you're washing in started out warm an hour ago and is now closer to cold, the grease in it turning from liquid to cloudy and beginning to catch on the copper surfaces in a way that requires more effort to remove. Your hands have been in water so often today that the skin on your palms has gone soft and slightly white, and the cracks on your knuckles have opened a little more. And you don't think about this because thinking about it won't help. Agnes drops a small copper saucepan. It hits the stone floor and rings like a bell, and everyone in the kitchen looks, and Agnes goes red, and Mrs. Hatch's head comes up from whatever she's doing. Agnes? Sorry, Mrs. Hatch. Pick it up. Check it for dents. If there's a dent, put it on the shelf and we'll deal with it tomorrow. Agnes picks it up, examines it in the firelight. There's a small one. Shelf? Mrs. Hatch looks at Agnes for a moment longer than strictly necessary. Agnes is 12 years old, and this is her first place, and she is doing her best, which is not always quite good enough, and Mrs. Hatch knows that, and you know that, and Agnes knows that most of all. No harm done. Keep working. Agnes keeps working. You keep working. The dinner is on its 3rd remove. The dessert course is going up, when something happens that doesn't happen often and is not entirely welcome. A request comes down from upstairs. Thomas descends the back stairs at speed, which is unusual for Thomas, who moves with the particular deliberate dignity of a man who knows he is well dressed, and intends to demonstrate this by never hurrying. Lady Ashworth wants to know if there are any of those almond biscuits left over. The ones that weren't sent up. Mrs. Hatch doesn't stop what she's doing. They're on the shelf in the cold larder. 3rd shelf left side. Thomas goes to the cold larder, returns with a plate of biscuits, goes back upstairs. Mrs. Hatch watches him go. She says nothing, but the calculation is visible on her face for the fraction of a second before she returns to the sauces. Those biscuits were already set aside. They were already part of the evening's tally, and now they're not. It happens. It happens rarely, but it happens. Sometimes what was supposed to stay down comes back up. This is not a problem in a large house on a good dinner party night. It is a small adjustment. Mrs. Hatch adjusts. She adjusts the way she always adjusts, by knowing exactly what else is in the kitchen and what it is worth and how it can be moved. At 10:30, the guests begin leaving. You know this because Thomas's footsteps change pattern, more vertical movement up and down the stairs in quick succession, retrieving coats and calling for carriages. The collective sound from above diminishes in stages, a party finding its ending. By 11 the dining room is being cleared. This is when the evening shifts. The cleared plates and serving dishes begin coming down to the kitchen in earnest. Thomas and William carry them in stacks that are technically too large for safety, and they carry them anyway because there is no time and because they have been doing this for years, and their hands know how to balance a stack of 12 plates without being told. The cleared dishes contain what 40 wealthy people left on their plates, and they left a great deal. This is worth understanding. not as a moral statement, not as a judgment, just as a fact about how these dinners worked. Service à la française, with 20 dishes on the table at once, meant that a single guest might eat from 3 or 4 dishes and leave 16 untouched. The dishes that were placed at the far end of the table from where you were seated you simply never reached. The second saddle of mutton, there were 2, placed symmetrically, might be cut once and otherwise ignored because everyone near it preferred the venison, and no one ever made the journey to investigate. This is not waste in the casual modern sense. This is a structural feature of the service style. The abundance is the point. The abundance is what is being displayed. A table with 20 dishes demonstrates that Lord Ashworth can afford 20 dishes. Whether they are eaten is, in a certain sense, secondary. The result is that a dinner for 40 in 1762 in a house like this produces a genuinely remarkable quantity of uneaten food. The saddle of mutton, 2/3 eaten, 1/3 untouched. The venison haunch, perhaps half. The near end, where the family and most honoured guests sat, was well carved. The far end barely touched. The potted shrimps, completely eaten everyone, because potted shrimps take well to being passed, and people who like them tend to clear the dish. The charlottes, 1½ eaten, half a charlotte standing on its plate intact, its bread casing still holding, its apple interior still visible through the crack in the top. 2 of the 4 syllabubs untouched. Still in their crystal glasses, the cream barely settled. 1 raised pie, opened and sampled and then largely abandoned because the pastry was perhaps a fraction too dense at the bottom, which Mrs. Hatch will know by feel when she sees it come back down, and she'll think about this for 3 days. The bread, approximately 45% still in the baskets. This is what comes down the back stairs at 11 o'clock on a Thursday evening in November 1762. This is what the Ashworth's 40 covers look like from below. Mrs. Hatch moves through the returned dishes with the speed and decisiveness of someone who's been doing this longer than you have been alive. She does not need to inventory it. She does not need to think about it. She looks at the venison and cuts away the carved section, sets the uncarved part on a wooden board. She looks at the charlotte and assesses it with a touch of 1 finger and sets it with the venison. She lifts the syllabub glasses and holds them to the light and puts them on the shelf by the cold larder. The bread goes into a flat basket. The bones from the mutton saddle, already stripped of most of their meat by the footman's carving, go into the stock pot that is already simmering on the back grate. Nothing is wasted. She looks at the cracked jelly, the one from earlier in the afternoon. It has been sitting on the shelf. She picks it up, runs a finger along the crack and adds it to the wooden board. She looks at the raised pie. She puts it on the board. She looks at you. Ready? You are. You have been at the back gate before, not on a dinner party night, but on ordinary evenings when there was surplus from the family's meal, smaller quantities, a practice run. You know where to stand. You know the wooden table that folds out from the wall beside the gate. You know which bucket holds the small earthenware pots for dripping. You know the cash box, small, iron, with a simple lock, that lives on the shelf above the table. Ready, you say. I'll be in the kitchen. You have the board, the dripping, the bread basket. Price the dripping at a halfpenny for the small pot, a penny for the large. Bread at a farthing apiece. The meat. Use your judgment. She looks at you steadily. The charlotte and the syllabubs are not for sale tonight. You nod. The charlotte and the syllabubs have a different destination then. Not tonight's gate. Some other arrangement. You don't ask. The pie is yours for the judgment. If it's someone who comes regular, you can let the mutton go cheaper. You'll know the regulars." She pauses. "Any problems, call me." She turns back to the kitchen. You take the wooden board, the bread basket, the dripping bucket and the cash box, and you go to the back gate. The Mews Lane at 11 o'clock at night is a different world from Mayfair. Stand at the back gate and look left and right along the lane, and this is what you see. Cobblestones running with horse water. Not sewage, or not primarily sewage, just the steady outflow of 8 carriage houses and their accompanying stables, which between them house perhaps 30 horses on this stretch alone. The cobblestones are uneven and dark. Stable lanterns hang at intervals, giving just enough light to move by, the amber glow of rushlights behind horn panes. The smell is hay and horse and dung, overlaid with the coal smoke coming from every chimney on the terrace, and with something else. The chill of November air that has been sitting over the Thames all day and found its way inland, bringing with it the faint mineral smell of cold river. 2 cats are sitting on the carriage house wall opposite. A groom is visible at the far end of the lane, walking one of Lord Ashworth's horses, one of the carriage horses that was in use tonight, still warm and needing to cool gradually before it can be stabled properly. The groom doesn't look at you. You're part of the normal furniture of this hour at this gate on a dinner party night. You fold out the wooden table from the wall, set down the board with the meat, set down the bread basket, set down the dripping bucket with its lined up pots, set the cash box on the shelf above, light the small lantern that hangs on the gate hook. You brought a taper from the kitchen, and your hands are steady enough on it, though the November air tries to take the flame immediately, and you cup it against your body until it catches. Then you wait. You don't wait long. The first person appears at the end of the Mews Lane from the Oxford Street direction within 3 minutes of the lantern going up. A woman, 40, maybe older. Hard to say in this light. Hard to say in any life that's been lived outdoors in London. She's wearing a dark wool coat that has been let out at the seams, brown stockings, wooden patterns identical to yours. She's carrying a covered pot in both hands, holding it against her stomach. She comes to the gate without hesitation, looks at the board, looks at you. Is Millie here tonight? Millie is what some of them call Mrs. Hatch. Not to her face, obviously. To her face she is Mrs. Hatch, or ma'am. Millie is what you're called when you're known well enough to be called something other than cook. Mrs. Hatch is inside. I'm at the gate tonight. The woman looks at you again, assessing. Seeing someone new at the gate is a reason for assessment. You're part of the arrangement, and arrangements only work when the people are known. New, are you? 7 months? Nell. It isn't a question. She already knows your name. Mrs. Hatch has told her, or someone else has, or she's been watching this gate long enough to know everyone connected to this house. That's right. She puts her pot on the edge of the table. It is empty. She looks at the board again. How much for the mutton? You look at the venison haunch, the uncarved section. It is perhaps a third of the full haunch, a substantial piece of meat, the kind of piece that represents 3 or 4 good meals for a small family if it is managed correctly. The full haunch upstairs cost Lord Ashworth approximately 4 6 pence. Mrs. Hatch said use your judgment. You look at the woman's coat, at the patched seams, at the way she is holding the empty pot, with the particular matter-of-fact grip of someone for whom an empty pot is not a metaphor but a regular state of affairs. 6 pence for the piece on the right, 3 pence for the smaller piece. She looks at the right-hand piece. A pause that is not indecision but calculation. She reaches into her coat and puts sixpence on the table. You put the meat in her pot. You wrap a piece of the bread around it. Not asked for, just added, because Mrs. Hatch's instructions were to use your judgment, and your judgment says this woman walked down the Mews Lane on a cold November evening with a covered pot for a reason. The woman looks at the bread. She doesn't say thank you. She nods once, covers her pot, picks it up, and walks back down the Mews Lane the way she came. You put the sixpence in the cash box. The second and third people arrive together, a man and a boy, perhaps 12, the boy carrying a flat-sided jug that would hold about half a pint. The man is a coachman from one of the other houses on the terrace. You can tell from his coat, the heavy boxcloth coachman's coat with the big brass buttons. He is not here out of necessity, not exactly. He is here out of the system. Coachmen have access to their own kitchen economies, their own arrangements with their cook, their own set of understood transactions. What he wants specifically is the dripping. Small pot of the beef dripping, he says. Halfpenny. He gives you a halfpenny. You fill the small earthenware pot with the dripping from the bucket, working it level with the wooden spatula, and hand it over. The boy looks at the board with undisguised interest. He's looking at the pie. How much for the pie? You look at the raised pie. The pastry is perhaps slightly heavy at the bottom, but otherwise intact. The filling, beef and spiced pork and hard-cooked eggs, is good. Will keep until tomorrow if the weather holds cold. A penny. The boy looks at the coachman. The coachman looks at the pie. He looks at you. A halfpenny might be closer to right, but the boy is looking at the pie with an expression that is not quite hunger, but is adjacent to it, and this is a full dinner-party pie from a Mayfair kitchen, and a penny is not an extravagant price. Penny, says the coachman. He gives you the penny. The boy carries the pie with both hands. They walk back toward the carriage house at the end of the lane. You put the penny in the cash box. More people come. They come in a loose stream rather than a line, staggered. Some of them clearly familiar with each other, some of them arriving and departing without making eye contact with anyone. A woman from the house 2 down the terrace sent by that household's cook for a specific cut of bread. Her household didn't have a dinner party tonight, and there's a visiting relative who is not eating well. 2 young men who might be apprentices or might be footmen from one of the houses on the north side of the square, who take the remaining mutton piece between them and split the cost with the careful precision of people who have learned to split costs precisely. An older man who comes for the dripping and produces his halfpenny before you have finished telling him the price, which means he has done this many times. A woman with a child. The child is perhaps 4, held by the hand, eyes wide and dark in the lantern light. The woman is looking at the table, at what's left. The bread, the remaining dripping, the scattered crumbs of the earlier board. What's left of the bread? 2 pieces in the basket. You look at them. You look at her. You look at the child. Farthing, you say. You should say halfpenny. A halfpenny would be the fair price for 2 pieces of day-old bread from a Mayfair kitchen. A farthing would be the price of 1 piece. She gives you a farthing. You give her both pieces. She walks away. The child turns around and looks at the lantern until she tugs his hand and he turns back. You stand at the gate in the cold November air and the lane is quiet again. The stream is thinning. The groom has gone back into the stables with the horse. One of the cats has left the wall. The amber light in the far stable lantern has diminished slightly. The cash box has sixpence, halfpenny, penny, penny, halfpenny, farthing. That is 9 pence farthing. That is what this gate has brought in tonight. That is part of Mrs. Hatch's perquisites, part of the arrangement that makes Mrs. Hatch's official salary of £18 a year, in fact considerably more than £18 a year. You are not resentful. You are part of the system too, in your way. Another woman appears at the end of the lane. She's different from the others in a way you notice before you can name it. She's wearing a dark dress, wool, well worn but well kept, and a wool shawl folded across her body and tied in the back in the way of someone who carries things and needs both hands free. She is perhaps 50. Her face is long and careful. She moves with an economy that suggests long practice at moving through places where one does not take up more space than necessary. She's carrying a canvas bag flat against her body, and she's looking at the table from a distance of 15 feet with an expression that is not hunger or need or calculation, but something harder to name. Familiarity, maybe. The familiarity of someone who knows exactly what this table is and has known it for a long time. She comes to the gate, looks at what's left. The dripping, still a half pot's worth, a large size. A few pieces of bread at the bottom of the basket. The bones from the mutton saddle that you set aside at the edge of the board, which are not properly for sale, but which represent real value to anyone who can make stock. She looks at the bones. 3p for the lot, you say, and then immediately wonder if you've gone too high. She looks at you. Those are bones. They're from a saddle of mutton that went upstairs tonight. Stock bones. Penny halfpenny, 2p. A pause. The canal haggling that is not really about the money. Both of you know the money is not the central fact here, but about establishing what kind of transaction this is, whether it's charity or business. 2p, she agrees. She gives you 2p. You wrap the bones in the paper the bread came in and put them in her canvas bag alongside without being asked. The rest of the bread and a small pot of dripping, not the large, the small, for which she's already paying 2p as part of the deal, and which you are adding without adjusting the price. She notices. She looks at what you've added. She doesn't comment on it. She takes the bag, but she doesn't leave immediately. She stands at the gate for a moment and looks at the house. Your house, Lord Ashworth's house, the pale brick 3-storey Mayfair townhouse with its brass knocker and its 8 windows, 6 of which are still lit at 11:30 at night. People inside still finishing their wine, probably. All the women have withdrawn to the drawing room, and the men are still around the table. She looks at it the way you looked at it for the first few weeks you were here, before you got used to it. The way a person looks at something that is real and present and somehow still impossible to fully accept as part of the same world you yourself inhabit. Then she looks at you. You knew. 7 months. Where from? Hertfordshire. A nod. How old? 15. She seems to consider this. Not with pity. Nothing about this woman's expression contains pity. The way that certain faces have had pity pressed out of them by extended contact with circumstances that don't respond to it, but with something else. Recognition, perhaps. You'll be all right, she says. It is not a reassurance exactly. It is a statement of assessed probability. She walks back down the Mews Lane. You stand at the gate for another 10 minutes in case anyone else comes. No one does. You fold the table back against the wall. You take the cash box inside. You take the board, which now has nothing on it except smears and crumbs, and put it on the preparation table to be washed in the morning. Mrs. Hatch is in the kitchen when you come in. She looks at the cash box without opening it. She looks at the board. All right? I sold the venison and the mutton and the pie and most of the dripping and the bread. The bones went out with the dripping. A pause. Bones? To a woman at the end. Man, I thought they were better out than sitting. Mrs. Hatch looks at you steadily. You cannot tell if this is wrong. What price? 2p for the bones and the bread and a small dripping together. Not approval, not disapproval. A sound that means the calculation is being assessed and found acceptable. The Charlotte? Still on the shelf. The syllabubs? Still there. She nods once. Go to bed. You've done well tonight. You're too tired to feel anything about this. You take off your apron, hang it on the hook by the scullery door and go to find Agnes, who is already asleep on the pallet, taking up more than her share of it in the boneless way of 12-year-olds who sleep as if they have no awareness that anyone else is present. You lie down beside her. The flagstone through the pallet is as cold as ever. The coal smell is as present as ever. You are asleep within a minute. Here is something worth understanding about what happened tonight at the gate. Not just at this gate, at every gate like it, on every dinner party night, in every street in Mayfair and St. James's and Grosvenor Square and Berkeley Square, across the whole geography of Georgian London where the great houses stand. The gate economy is not a charitable system. It is not a welfare system. It is not something the aristocracy designed or intended, or is aware of in any meaningful sense. Lord Ashworth, finishing his wine upstairs, does not know that tonight a woman walked down his mews lane and bought the mutton bones from his Thursday dinner, and will make stock from them tomorrow that will last her family 3 days. He has not thought about it. He will not think about it. This transaction takes place in a part of his household that is as invisible to him as the kitchen ceiling joists. The gate economy is something that cooks designed over generations out of the material reality of large kitchens, producing more food than any household can consume. It is a system of extraction and redistribution that runs on customary rights and tacit understanding, and the particular intelligence of people who manage the gap between abundance and scarcity for a living. It is not a perfect system. It does not reach everyone who needs it. The woman who got the venison bones tonight is someone who knows where to come and when, which means she is already inside the system. The people who don't know, the newly arrived, the ones without any connection to the service world, the ones in the rookeries of St. Giles or Seven Dials who are genuinely outside every network of exchange, they are not at this gate. The gate doesn't find them. They find what they can by other means, or they don't. But it is real. It is as real as the dinner upstairs. In some ways it is older than the dinner upstairs, older than these houses, older than Mayfair itself. The practice of the back gate and the broken meat and the cook's perquisites is a system with roots that go back through centuries of English domestic life. A set of customary rights so old that no one remembers who established them, or whether they were ever formally established at all. They exist because they have always existed. Because in any system where some people have enormous quantities of something that other people need desperately, some arrangement tends to emerge. This is one of the arrangements. You will spend 3 years at the back gate of this house before you're old enough, and trusted enough, and experienced enough to be made kitchen-maid proper. You will stand at that gate in all weathers, November frost and January ice, and the particular misery of a wet March night when the cobblestones turn to mirrors and the lantern light catches nothing but the rain. You will learn the regulars and the occasional people and the one-time appearances that you never see again and sometimes wonder about. You will learn the difference between a price that is fair and a price that is the right price for the person in front of you, which is not always the same thing. You will learn how to read a face in lamplight at 11 o'clock at night, which is something that requires time and attention, and a particular kind of focus that is not exactly kindness and is not exactly shrewdness, but is something in between. And you will learn, slowly and completely, the thing that Mrs. Hatch already knows, that a great house is not one thing. It is two things running parallel, separated by 12 stairs and a service door. And the second thing, the kitchen thing, the gate thing, the below stairs thing, is not the lesser of the two. It is simply the one that is not seen. But before all of that, before the 3 years of gate duty and kitchen work and the slow accumulation of knowledge, there is morning, and morning is now because you have been asleep for perhaps 5 hours and the bells of St. George's are striking and it is Thursday again. Not Thursday. Friday. November again. A different November. Time has moved in the way that time moves in service, which is to say quickly when you're not looking and very slowly when you are. On the Thursday morning after your first gate duty, you wake up and your hands are worse. The cracks on your knuckles opened fully during the night, and the right one, the deepest crack, on the second knuckle of the right index finger, has bled a little. It has stuck to the shift fabric. You unstick it carefully. This is a problem. Not a catastrophic problem, but a working problem, because cracked and bleeding hands in a kitchen are a contamination risk, and Mrs. Hatch's kitchen does not operate with contamination risks when it can avoid them. You go to Mrs. Hatch before she can see it herself. "My hands," you say, and show her. She looks. She goes to the shelf where she keeps the kitchen medicaments. A small wooden box, not full of anything extraordinary, just the practical necessities of a kitchen. Plasters made of linen, a small pot of goose grease, a twist of paper with dried lavender, a piece of tallow hardened into a cake that she uses for rough skin. She takes the tallow cake and hands it to you. Work that into the cracks morning and night. Keep them covered with a cloth today. She looks at you. Did you have these before? They've been getting worse since autumn. They'll get worse through winter. Tallow every day. A pause. My hands were like yours when I was your age. They toughen. It takes 2 winters. This is the most personal thing Mrs. Hatch has ever said to you. You apply the tallow. You wrap the worst knuckles with strips of linen. You go back to work. Mrs. Hatch watches you move to the stock pot. She doesn't say anything else, but she puts the tallow cake at the end of your shelf where it is accessible without asking. This is what kindness looks like in this kitchen. Not softness, not sentiment. Tallow on a shelf where you can reach it. In the weeks that follow your first gate duty, you begin to understand the gate economy more completely. Not just the mechanics of it. You understood those quickly. But the geography of it, where the food goes after it leaves this house. Some of it goes to the servants of other houses, coachmen, footmen, ladies' maids who have their own below-stairs economies, but whose kitchens are smaller or less productive, and who supplement from the larger operations nearby. This is the most direct exchange, almost a trade among professionals. Some of it goes to the semi-regular people you begin to recognise. The washerwoman from the street behind the mews who comes for dripping every other Friday. The old man with a flat cap who never gives his name and always wants bread and always pays exactly the right price, with coins that are always ready in his coat pocket. The young woman who comes for bones, and who, you will learn eventually, is feeding not just herself but 4 others in lodgings 2 streets north, And who sells the finished stock to a cook shop on Oxford Street for a small profit? And some of it, the part that is hardest to trace, goes further, into networks you can't see from this gate, through hands you'll never know, reaching parts of the city that are invisible from South Audley Street. On a Saturday morning in late November, Mrs. Hatch sends you on an errand. "Take this," she says, handing you a basket covered with a cloth. Inside, when you look, a wrapped piece of cold roast beef, the very end of Tuesday's joint, which has been in the cold larder, and is perfectly good but won't keep past Sunday. A wedge of hard cheese, 3 pieces of bread. "St. Giles," she says, and gives you a street and a number. St. Giles is half a mile north. You know what St. Giles is. You've been past its edges on errand since you arrived. To the market, to the chandler on Neal Street, once to the apothecary on Longacre. You have seen the transition point where Mayfair's pale brick and clean windows give way to something different. You have not been into St. Giles proper. You go now. November morning, cold and bright. The kind of London day where the light is hard and clear and gives everything sharp shadows. The walk from South Audley Street to St. Giles takes you north through Mayfair, across Oxford Street, wide and noisy, full of carts and chairmen and dogs and the general chaos of a major thoroughfare on a Saturday, and into the streets beyond, which narrow almost immediately, the buildings pressing closer together, the air changing as you cross Oxford Street with the specific quality that city air has in neighbourhoods where cooking smells and privy smells and coal smoke, and the smell of many people in small spaces are not separated out but compounded into something thick and human. By the time you reach St. Giles High Street, the streets are narrower than anything in Mayfair. You're looking for a number. You find it. A door in a court off the main street, a small court with perhaps 6 houses around it, each one subdivided, each one housing more people than was ever intended. The door is open. A child sits in the doorway eating something out of a piece of paper. You go past him, inside, up a staircase that is damp with something you don't look at too closely. The address Mrs. Hatch gave you is the first floor back. A woman comes to the door, older than Mrs. Hatch, 70 perhaps, face so deeply lined that the wrinkles have wrinkles. She's wearing 2 shawls crossed over each other and tied in the back. She looks at the basket. "Millie sent you." Mrs. Hatch, "Yes." The woman takes the basket, looks inside, nods once with the particular nod of someone who has long since stopped expressing more than functional acknowledgement about things that are either good or bad. "Tell her thank you." "I will." You go back down the stairs. You go past the child in the doorway, who is still eating. You go out into the court, into St. Giles High Street, and back south toward Oxford Street. You don't know who the old woman is. You will not ask, and Mrs. Hatch will not explain. This is not your story, and you don't need the information to carry the basket. What you understand, because you're 15 years old and have been in service for 7 months and have been watching closely and making the available inferences, is that Mrs. Hatch has been making this arrangement for a long time, longer than you have been alive probably, and that the basket from Tuesday's joint is as much a part of the gate economy as the dripping and the bones and the bread, just further removed from the exchange and therefore less visible. The system has no formal name. It has no written rules. It operates on memory and custom and the relationships between specific people who understand what the arrangement is and keep it going with the same reliability with which Mrs. Hatch keeps her stock pot simmering. You carry the basket back empty. You tell Mrs. Hatch thank you has been sent, She nods and goes back to the sauce she was making. That is all that is said about it. That is all that needs to be said. On a Tuesday in December, 6 weeks after your first gate duty, you have an afternoon off. Not the whole afternoon. You'll be needed in the kitchen by 4, but from 1 o'clock until 3:30, which is enough time to walk somewhere and back if you walk with purpose. You have been in London since April. You've seen the streets immediately around South Audley Street. You have been to Oxford Street and to Covent Garden Market twice, and to the apothecary on Long Acre, and on the errand to St. Giles. You have not been further. Today you walk south, through Mayfair, into St. James's toward the river. The walk from South Audley Street to the Thames takes perhaps 25 minutes if you go directly, down Park Lane or through the park and south to Westminster Bridge. You go through the park, Hyde Park on this side, then St. James's Park, because the park costs nothing and the roads around it are full of traffic and mud. Hyde Park in December is brown and cold and beautiful in the particular way that London parks are beautiful in winter. The trees are bare, the ground is hard, the grass has gone to stiff grey-brown, and the sky over all of it is the soft pewter of December cloud. You walk along the path that runs beside the Serpentine, the long lake created 30 years ago by damming the Westbourne River, which is now a fashionable place to walk in summer and is currently entirely devoid of fashionable people because it is December and cold and Tuesday. You walk. This is what your 2 hours off looks like. You walk because walking is the only mobility available to you, and you've been in a kitchen for 7 months, and the fact of open sky above your head is something that requires active experience to believe in. Through St. James's Park, down Birdcage Walk, toward Westminster. Westminster Bridge comes into view as you cross the road at the southern end of the park, and the Thames comes with it, and both of them together stop you for a moment at the top of the steps that lead down to the road. Westminster Bridge was completed in 1750, 12 years ago now. It is still one of the wonders of the city in the way that new things are still wonders, before familiarity absorbs them. A stone bridge with 13 arches spanning the Thames, wide enough for 2 carriages to pass each other, with a balustrade you can stand at and look north and south along the river. You go to the balustrade. You put your hands on the cold stone and you look. The Thames on a December Tuesday morning is grey and moving and enormous. The tide is running. You can see it in the way the water pushes past the bridge piers, the small eddies, the surface that looks solid from a distance and is moving constantly at close range. Out on the water, coal barges, 3 or 4 of them, riding low and slow upstream. A wherryman's boat quick across the current, the 2 oarsmen working the oars in perfect synchronization. Something larger, a lighter maybe, loaded with barrels, tied to a buoy in the middle distance and moving with the tide. Upriver to your right, the towers of the Houses of Parliament are visible in the grey December light, the old palace still standing in 1762, still the seat of what the country considers its government, its stone pale and old and complicated against the sky. Beyond it, further upriver, the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral sits above everything else on the north bank, grey-white and permanent, its presence so familiar from a distance that it has become part of the horizon rather than an interruption to it. Downriver to your left, the old city, Southwark on the south bank, its rooftops uneven and dark, the Tower of London just visible in the distance, its white keep above the outer walls. The river between here and there is busy in the way that the Thames is always busy, a working river that never fully sleeps, moving goods and people in both directions around the clock. Stand here and think about this. Somewhere behind you, half a mile north, a kitchen is producing dinner. Mrs. Hatch is beginning the preparations for this evening's family meal. Agnes is washing pots. James is turning something on the spit. The range is going and the coal smoke is rising from the chimney to join the coal smoke of 1,000 other chimneys, and all of that smoke together is one of the things you can smell from here, even from the middle of the bridge, the London smell that has no single source and no single explanation, just the collective exhaust of an enormous number of lives being lived in a small area, and somewhere in front of you, south of the river, across Suffolk and further, the city's other world, the one that doesn't look like Mayfair, the rookeries and the slums and the courts and the alleys and the people who are living in them with no gate to come to, no system to extract from, no Mrs. Hatch with her wooden box of kitchen medicaments and her tallow cake on the accessible shelf. And here you stand, 15 years old, from Hertfordshire, on a stone bridge in the middle of a city that is simultaneously the largest and richest city in England, and a place where, half a mile in any direction, people are hungry. A woman passes you on the bridge going south. She's well dressed, not Mayfair well dressed, not the fine wool and the fashionable cut that you see on the women who come to call at the front door of Lord Ashworth's house, but good clothes, solid clothes, the clothes of someone with money and no particular wish to display it. She's carrying a parcel under one arm. She walks past you without looking at you. You're standing at the balustrade in your brown wool dress and your apron and your pattens, and she's a woman in good clothes going somewhere on a Tuesday afternoon, and you're not within the range of her attention. This is not malice. This is geometry. You are below the sight line. You stand on the bridge for 10 more minutes. You look at the river. You watch the coal barges. Then you walk back to South Audley Street. You're in the kitchen before 4 o'clock. Mrs. Hatch glances at you when you come in and nods, which means you are on time, which means no comment is required. You pick up where you left off. This is your afternoon off in December 1762. This is what 2 hours of freedom looks like when you are 15 and in service in Mayfair and the city is all around you, and also, in most of its essential dimensions, inaccessible. January comes, the winter deepens. The gate on dinner party nights is cold enough now that you wear 2 aprons folded across your body under the outer one. Your hands in the cold air are a specific misery. Not the cracked knuckle misery of the wet work, but the bone-cold misery of standing outside with insufficient clothing while the temperature drops below freezing and the lantern makes its small amber circle, and outside that circle, London is very dark. The regulars come through January frost and February sleet. They come in the particular way that people come who have no choice about it. Not grudgingly, not heroically, just steadily, because steady is what this life requires, and anything else is a luxury they haven't got. You learn them, not their full stories, not their situations or their histories or the geometry of how they got to this mews lane on this cold night with their covered pots and their exact change, but their faces, their particular ways of approaching the gate. Which ones speak and which ones don't. Which ones are in a hurry and which ones stand for a moment as if the lantern light is something they're not in a rush to leave. The woman who came first on your first night, she comes most Thursdays. She always gets the mutton when there is mutton. She never says more than is necessary, but she has started calling you by your name without being reminded of it, which is a form of acknowledgement. The coachman with the boy comes once a month, roughly. The boy is growing visibly between November and January, and by February he is noticeably taller, and Mrs. Hatch comments on it with a satisfaction that surprises you, as if the boy's growth is something she's had a hand in. The old man with the flat cap and the exact change comes every week without exception, through weather that would keep sensible people indoors. You never learn his name, he never volunteers it, but by February he has started nodding when he arrives, the nod of recognition, and you nod back, and this is the entirety of your relationship, and it is somehow sufficient. New people come too. The gate is not a closed membership. A cook at a house on the next street tells someone about it. That someone tells someone else. The Mews Lane network carries information, which is to say, news of what is available and when travels along the same channels that all the below-stairs information travels along. Servants talk. Servants always talk. This is how you know things about the other houses in the terrace, and they know things about yours, and this particular form of intelligence has been operating in English domestic life since before anyone now alive can remember. By March, you know the gate, as well as you know any part of your own life. In March, something happens that is small and large at the same time. On a Thursday gate night, late, nearly midnight, after most of the regulars have come and gone, a girl appears at the end of the Mews Lane. Young, perhaps 13, perhaps younger. Hard to say in this light. Thin, a shawl over her head and shoulders. She's standing at the end of the lane, not moving. You look at her. She's looking at the lantern above the gate. She doesn't come closer. You understand this. You understand that you are at the gate, which is to say, you are the system, and the system has a particular look to it from the outside. The table, the lantern, the pots, the cloth-wrapped goods. That is legible to people who already know how this works, and completely unreadable to people who don't. She is standing at the end of the lane with the expression of someone who has been told there is something here but doesn't know how to approach it. You call to her, not loudly. Come on. She comes, slowly. The particular way of someone who is not sure they're allowed to be here, which is both true and not true simultaneously. She comes to the gate. She looks at the table. She looks at you. I was told, she says, and stops. Someone said there's sometimes food here. There is, you say. What did you want? She doesn't have a pot. She doesn't have money, visibly. She has a piece of cloth folded over one arm, the way you'd carry something if you were hoping to put something in it. There is one piece of bread left. There is the last of the small dripping pot. There is, at the back of the board, half a dish of the broken sweetbreads from tonight's dinner that came back down with the clear dishes and that you have been holding separately because sweetbreads in cream sauce don't keep well, and you are uncertain what to do with them. You put the bread and the dripping in her cloth. You wrap the sweetbreads separately in a piece of paper. You put that in the cloth too. Don't let the sweetbreads sit, you say. They won't keep past morning. She nods. She's looking at the cloth bundle with an expression you recognise and do not name. She closes the cloth around it. No charge, you say. Come back Thursdays if you need. She goes. The Mews Lane is quiet. The lantern is burning low. You blow it out. You fold the table. You go inside. You take the cash box to Mrs. Hatch. You do not mention the girl. Not because you are hiding it, but because it doesn't require explaining. Mrs. Hatch knows the gate. She knows what happens at the gate at midnight when the dripping is nearly gone and a cold March night is producing no more regular customers. She will understand the arithmetic without being told. Mrs. Hatch opens the cash box, counts, nods. Good night, she says. Good night, Mrs. Hatch. You go to the scullery. Agnes is already asleep. You lie down on the pallet in the dark and listen to the faint sound of St. George's bells marking the hour and think about the girl in the shawl and where she went and whether she'll come back and what the sweetbreads tasted like when she ate them. You fall asleep before you finish thinking any of it. Spring comes to Mayfair the way it comes to every part of London, which is to say, slowly and then all at once, and with a general sense that everyone has been waiting longer than was reasonable. You notice it first in the kitchen. The light through the small high windows above the range changes, not brighter, not yet, but longer. The morning darkness is gone by 5:30 instead of 6:30. The cold that has been sitting in the kitchen wall since November begins to lose its certainty. There is a day in late March, a Tuesday, you remember it specifically, when you go out the back gate into the Mews Lane on an errand to the coal merchants on the next street, and the sun is hitting the cobblestones at an angle that is unmistakably warmer than anything you have felt since October, and you stop for a moment with your face up at it the way you'd stop for warmth at the range. Mrs. Hatch sees you when you come back in. She says nothing about it. But she sends you out on 2 more errands that afternoon, unnecessary ones. To the herb garden at the end of the mews where the household's kitchen herbs are kept, where there is in fact nothing to collect yet, but where you spend 5 minutes in the March sun establishing that this is true. This is a form of management. This is what Mrs. Hatch does with the people in her kitchen. She does not talk about morale. She does not acknowledge that a scullery maid who has spent the winter indoors over a stone sink might need sun in March, the way the kitchen garden needs it. But she sends you outside. April. The first asparagus comes from Covent Garden. The cream gets richer as the cows come back to grass. The early strawberries arrive by mid-May. Expensive, the first one's always expensive, appearing on Lord Ashworth's table, with the ceremony that the asparagus doesn't receive because asparagus has been available since April and has lost its novelty, while the first strawberries of the year are still an event. You wash the strawberry hulls from the serving dish on the night they're first sent up. The smell of them, high and bright and sweet in a way that nothing smells in winter, is something you carry around for the rest of the evening. This is your spring. The smell of strawberry hulls in the wash water, and the sun on the Mews Lane cobblestones, and the light lasting until 7:30. By May you're 16. Your birthday passed in the last week of April. You know this because you counted from the date the vicar's wife wrote in the letter of character, but there is no ceremony to it. You are 16 instead of 15. The distinction is primarily internal. In May, Lord and Lady Ashworth give a garden party. A garden party is different from a dinner. A garden party means the food moves outdoors, which in May in London means it moves outdoors for 3 hours and then returns when the English spring delivers its considered opinion on outdoor events, which is that they are a fine idea in theory and a cold, slightly damp reality in practice. The garden party runs from 3 in the afternoon to 7 in the evening, perhaps 30 guests. The food is different from a dinner. Cold cuts, raised pies, tarts, syllabubs and glasses, lemonade, a punch bowl, small savoury pastries that require a specific kind of pastry skill that is not yours and that Mary deploys with what you've come to recognise as quiet pride. You help carry the food from the kitchen to the garden through the kitchen passage. Twice, because it all has to go out at 3 and most of it comes back in at 5 when the cloud comes over, and Lord Ashworth makes the decision that the remainder of the party will be inside. The guests move indoors through the garden door while the food is being carried back in through the kitchen passage, and there is a moment of confused traffic in the garden doorway. where you're carrying a large tray of cold meats and 3 guests are trying to come in through the same door. And one of them, a woman in pale green silk, perhaps 30, not looking where she's going, nearly walks directly into the tray. She stops. You stop. The tray, to its credit, does not move. She looks at the tray. She looks at you. You look at her. She's a woman in pale green silk. She's wearing pearls. Her hair is powdered, the style that all the fashionable women are wearing this year, white and elaborate and significantly taller than it needs to be to achieve its purpose. She looks at you for perhaps 2 seconds in the doorway, not with contempt, not with anything much that you can name, with the expression of someone who has briefly become aware of a piece of furniture that is blocking their path. Then she turns to the side, goes around you and goes inside. You carry the tray in. You go back to the kitchen. Thomas, who was at the garden door and saw the whole thing, says nothing to you about it. You say nothing to him. This is not a story that needs to be told because it is not an unusual story. It is the story of the garden door, which is to say the story of 2 worlds that occupy the same address and operate at 90 degrees to each other. And the fact that they sometimes briefly intersect in doorways is not an event. It is just the architecture of the thing showing itself for a moment. What you think about later, washing the tray in the scullery. She was about 30. Whatever she ate at this party, she didn't think about where it came from. She thought about the food the way you think about a chair, that it is there and fulfills its function, and the question of who made it, and how and what they ate while making it does not enter the calculation. This is not a failure on her part. It is simply what happens when the distance between production and consumption is large enough. When there are 12 stairs and a service door and a daily economy that is completely invisible to you from where you're sitting. You wash the tray. You dry it. You hang it on the rack. The summer that follows is the summer you understand the gate properly for the first time. Not the mechanics. You understood those in November. The geography of it, where it fits in the larger system of how London actually feeds itself. On an afternoon off in June, you go to the Cook's Row. Cook's Row is not its official name. It doesn't have an official name exactly. But this is what the people who use it call the collection of cook shops and ordinaries and stalls that cluster on the streets between Covent Garden and the Strand, where the food economy of London is most visible to anyone who cares to look. You go with Mary, who has been twice before, and who moves through it with the confidence of someone who knows exactly what she's looking at. The first thing you see is the ordinary. Not a fancy ordinary, not a tavern, ordinary with tablecloths and a fixed price for 3 courses, and a certain kind of gentleman who eats there because the food is predictable and the company acceptable. A plain ordinary. A room barely larger than a parlour with 4 tables, benches rather than chairs, and a menu chalked on a board by the door. The menu is boiled beef and carrots, 18p, cold cuts and bread, 10p, soup, 4p, bread and cheese, 6p. These prices are not cheap in any absolute sense, but they are cheaper than cooking for yourself in lodgings where you have no kitchen, no fuel, no equipment, and no time. Which describes a significant number of the people eating in this room right now, journeymen and clerks and apprentices and single working women who live in single rooms and whose entire cooking infrastructure is a fireplace, a pot, and the will to use them after a working day. The boiled beef and carrots has an interesting quality. Mary notices you looking at it. Where do you think that beef came from? You look at the beef. Good enough quality, not a joint from a nobleman's table, Not that fresh or that tender, but not the cheapest cut either. Wholesale, you say. Maybe. Some of it. But some of it comes from the gate. She means the gate economy. Houses that run a dinner every week, the cook sells off the surplus to the ordinaries, not the best cuts. Those go to the regulars who come direct. The ordinaries take the pieces that nobody specific wants. She points to the cook shop across the road. A different establishment from the ordinary. Not a sit-down place, but a shop where prepared food is sold to be taken away. Pies, cold meats wrapped in paper, small tubs of broth, a sign in the window, dripping, large pots 1 penny, small pots 1/2 penny. Where does she get the dripping from? 6 or 8 houses around Covent Garden and St. Martin's. Different cook sends around a boy on Friday morning. She buys it at bulk rate. You stand on the pavement and look at the cook shop and think about this. The dripping that leaves Lord Ashworth's kitchen through the back gate, 1/2 penny pot at a time. Is that the end of it? Or does some of it travel further? Does a pot of Ashworth dripping end up on the shelf of this shop, resold to someone who buys in bulk for the frying? You don't know. But the possibility of it, the particular image of the dripping from the venison haunch, travelling 1/2 mile north and then 1/2 mile south in someone else's hands before it reaches the person who needs it, is something your mind does something interesting with. Not distressing, just large. The system is larger than the gate, larger than the kitchen, larger than any individual transaction within it. London feeds itself through hundreds of these systems running simultaneously. The gate economy is one of them. The ordinaries and the cook shops are others. The street sellers, the ones selling hot soup and fried fish and potatoes baked in the embers and small loaves from baskets, are others still. The charity dinners, the workhouse bread, the parish soup, all of them different in kind, different in dignity, different in what they cost and who they reach and who they exclude. None of them is sufficient alone. Together they constitute something that the people at the top of the system, the Lord Ashworths, eating their 40-cover dinners, have never needed to think about, and the people at the bottom, the girl in the shawl at the gate at midnight, cannot afford to not think about every single day. You stand on the pavement in the June sun and look at the cook's shop and feel the scale of it. Mary has moved on to the next stall, a woman selling watercress from a flat basket. Early summer watercress, the first good crop of it, bright and fresh. Watercress, she says. Yes, you say, and you buy a handful for a farthing and eat it standing on the pavement in June 1762 in the smell of London, and it tastes of cold water and iron and the particular freshness of things just out of the ground. The autumn of your second year comes in a different colour from the first. The first autumn, last year's November, your first gate duty, the cold and the lantern and the woman with the covered pot. That autumn was the autumn of learning, of not yet knowing where anything was. This autumn you know where things are. You know the gate, you know the regulars, you know which Tuesday surplus looks like a good week and which looks like a harder one. You know that the cracked jelly on the shelf is always yours to sell, and that the good jellies are not, and that this distinction is perfectly clear to Mrs. Hatch and to you, and to no one else in the household, because no one else has reason to track such things. You know Mrs. Hatch better. Not personally, not her history, not her family beyond Ruth, not the Bristol she came from or the kitchens she trained in before this one, but professionally. You know her timing. You know which issue she will intervene on, and which she will leave for you to solve. You know the particular silence that means she is considering something, and the different particular silence that means she has already decided and is waiting for you to catch up. You know the kitchen's rhythms, the way Tuesday and Friday are different from Thursday, the way a family dinner requires different management than a dinner party, not less work exactly, but differently distributed work, less coordination required, but more attention to the details of a smaller table where every dish is noticed. The way a cold snap in October means an extra delivery of coal and a recalibration of how long things will keep in the cold larder. And you know the gate better, which means you know the system better, which means you understand something about the city that you did not understand when you arrived. On a Thursday evening in October, your second October in this house, you're at the gate as usual. The October air is cold but not frozen yet. The first hard frost is a week or two away. You can feel it in the quality of the cold, the way it has a different texture from summer cold, more serious, less negotiable. The woman who came on your first night, the one with the covered pot, the first customer you ever served, the one whose name you still don't know, who comes most Thursdays, arrives as usual. Later than usual tonight, closer to midnight, but she comes. She looks at the board. Mutton again tonight. There is almost always mutton. How much? You tell her. She pays. You wrap it. You add, without comment, the last of tonight's bread. She takes the bundle. She stands at the gate for a moment. Tonight something is different in her posture. Not anxious, not ill. Just changed somehow, in a way you can't immediately read. My daughter's been taken on, she says, unexpectedly. She's not someone who volunteers information. You've never heard her offer more than necessary. Oh? At a house on Davy Street, scullery maid. How old is she? 14. You were 15 when you arrived. This girl is 14, starting what you started. What's her name? Eliza. She'll be all right, you say, and you mean it the way it was meant to you, not as a promise, not as sentiment, but as an assessed probability, as a thing that has been measured by people who know what they're measuring and found to be the most likely outcome. The first winter's the hardest. After that, your hands toughen. The woman looks at you. In the lamplight, her face is the particular face of a woman who has been managing the gap between what she has and what she needs for so long that the management has become as automatic as breathing, and who is briefly, in this moment, looking at something that gives her some different information about what the gap might contain. She nods. She takes her bundle. She goes back down the mews lane. You stand at the gate in the cold October air for the remaining time, watching the lane, and no one else comes, and the lantern burns down, and eventually you blow it out and fold the table and go inside. This is October in your second year. This is what it looks like. By November of the second year, your second November at the gate, your second winter of tallow on the knuckles, your second year of waking at 4 to the smell of coal and bones, you have been promoted. Not a large promotion. You're still not kitchen maid, but you're no longer purely scullery maid either. You are the one who manages the cold larder now, who tracks what is in it, what is aging, what needs to be used before it turns. You are the one Mrs. Hatch consults when she wants to know if there is enough of the Tuesday beef to stretch to Thursday without additional purchase, which is a form of trust that you do not take lightly. And on gate nights, you're now the one who trains the new girl. Her name is Polly. She's 14, from Essex, arrived in October with a letter of character and an expression of concentrated bewilderment that you remember from your own first weeks. She is going to be all right. You can tell this immediately. She has the right kind of practical attention, looking at how things are done before asking why they're done that way. On her first gate night, you stand beside her and you tell her what Mrs. Hatch told you, which is use your judgment, and you tell her the things that Mrs. Hatch did not tell you, which are: the woman with the covered pot is a regular, always mutton if there is mutton, never needs to be asked what she wants. The coachman with the boy comes once a month and always wants dripping. The old man with the flat cap pays the exact right price every time, don't make him wait for change. And sometimes, near midnight, someone comes who doesn't know the system, and when that happens, you help them without making it a charity, because it is not a charity. It is the gate, and the gate is for everyone who comes to it. Polly listens. She writes nothing down. There is nothing to write. This is oral knowledge, passed from person to person the way the whole system is passed, the way all the real knowledge of this kitchen is passed. She is at the gate the next Thursday on her own. You are in the kitchen, washing pots. Mrs. Hatch is nearby, working on a sauce, not looking at the kitchen door, but aware of it, in the way she's aware of everything in her domain. She'll be all right, you say. Not to Mrs. Hatch exactly, half to yourself. She will, says Mrs. Hatch, and keeps stirring the sauce. And so the gate keeps, and the kitchen keeps, and the system keeps, which is to say the arrangement between what a great house has and what the city outside it needs keeps running, quietly, invisibly, through the back gate and the mews lane and the streets beyond, through the covered pots and the flat baskets and the canvas bags, through the hands of everyone who knows where to come and when. Spring comes to Mayfair the way it comes to every part of London, which is to say, slowly and then all at once, and with a general sense that everyone has been waiting longer than was reasonable. You notice it first in the kitchen. The light through the small high windows above the range changes, not brighter, not yet, but longer. The morning darkness is gone by 5:30 instead of 6:30. The cold that has been sitting in the kitchen wall since November begins to lose its certainty. There is a day in late March, a Tuesday, you remember it specifically, when you go out the back gate into the mews lane on an errand to the coal merchants on the next street, and the sun is hitting the cobblestones at an angle that is unmistakably warmer than anything you have felt since October, and you stop for a moment with your face up at it the way you'd stop for warmth at the range. Mrs. Hatch sees you when you come back in. She says nothing about it, but she sends you out on 2 more errands that afternoon, unnecessary ones, to the herb garden at the end of the mews, where the household's kitchen herbs are kept, where there is in fact nothing to collect yet, but where you spend 5 minutes in the March sun establishing that this is true. This is a form of management. This is what Mrs. Hatch does with the people in her kitchen. She does not talk about morale. She does not acknowledge that a scullery maid who has spent the winter indoors over a stone sink might need sun in March the way the kitchen garden needs it. But she sends you outside. April. The first asparagus comes from Covent Garden. The cream gets richer as the cows come back to grass. The early strawberries arrive by mid-May. Expensive, the first ones always expensive, appearing on Lord Ashworth's table with a ceremony that the asparagus doesn't receive, because asparagus has been available since April and has lost its novelty, while the first strawberries of the year are still an event. You wash the strawberry hulls from the serving dish on the night they're first sent up. The smell of them, high and bright and sweet in a way that nothing smells in winter, is something you carry around for the rest of the evening. This is your spring. The smell of strawberry hulls in the washwater and the sun on the Mews Lane cobblestones and the light lasting until 7:30. By May, you're 16. Your birthday passed in the last week of April. You know this because you counted from the date the vicar's wife wrote in the letter of character, but there is no ceremony to it. You are 16 instead of 15. The distinction is primarily internal. In May, Lord and Lady Ashworth give a garden party. A garden party is different from a dinner. A garden party means the food moves outdoors, which in May in London means it moves outdoors for 3 hours and then returns when the English spring delivers its considered opinion on outdoor events, which is that they are a fine idea in theory and a cold, slightly damp reality in practice. The garden party runs from 3 in the afternoon to 7 in the evening. Perhaps 30 guests. The food is different from a dinner. Cold cuts, raised pies, tarts, syllabubs in glasses, lemonade, a punch bowl, small savoury pastries that require a specific kind of pastry skill that is not yours, and that Mary deploys with what you have come to recognise as quiet pride. You help carry the food from the kitchen to the garden through the kitchen passage, twice because it all has to go out at 3, and most of it comes back in at 5 when the cloud comes over, and Lord Ashworth makes the decision that the remainder of the party will be inside. The guests move indoors through the garden door while the food is being carried back in through the kitchen passage, and there is a moment of confused traffic in the garden doorway where you're carrying a large tray of cold meats, and 3 guests are trying to come in through the same door, and one of them, a woman in pale green silk, perhaps 30, not looking where she's going, nearly walks directly into the tray. She stops. You stop. The tray, to its credit, does not move. She looks at the tray. She looks at you. You look at her. She is a woman in pale green silk. She's wearing pearls. Her hair is powdered, the style that all the fashionable women are wearing this year, white and elaborate and significantly taller than it needs to be to achieve its purpose. She looks at you for perhaps 2 seconds in the doorway, not with contempt, not with anything much that you can name, with the expression of someone who has briefly become aware of a piece of furniture that is blocking their path. Then she turns to the side, goes around you, and goes inside. You carry the tray in. You go back to the kitchen. Thomas, who was at the garden door and saw the whole thing, says nothing to you about it. You say nothing to him. This is not a story that needs to be told because it is not an unusual story. It is the story of the garden door, which is to say the story of 2 worlds that occupy the same address and operate at 90 degrees to each other. And the fact that they sometimes briefly intersect in doorways is not an event. It is just the architecture of the thing showing itself for a moment. What you think about later, washing the tray in the scullery. She was about 30. Whatever she ate at this party, she didn't think about where it came from. She thought about the food the way you think about a chair, that it is there and fulfills its function, and the question of who made it, and how and what they ate while making it, does not enter the calculation. This is not a failure on her part. It is simply what happens when the distance between production and consumption is large enough. When there are 12 stairs and a service door and a daily economy that is completely invisible to you from where you are sitting. You wash the tray. You dry it. You hang it on the rack. The summer that follows is the summer you understand the gate properly for the first time. Not the mechanics. You understood those in November. The geography of it, where it fits in the larger system of how London actually feeds itself. On an afternoon off in June, you go to the Cook's Row. Cook's Row is not its official name. It doesn't have an official name exactly. But this is what the people who use it call the collection of cookshops and ordinaries and stalls that cluster on the streets between Covent Garden and the Strand, where the food economy of London is most visible to anyone who cares to look. You go with Mary, who has been twice before, and who moves through it with the confidence of someone who knows exactly what she's looking at. The first thing you see is the ordinary. Not a fancy ordinary, not a tavern, ordinary with tablecloths and a fixed price for 3 courses, and a certain kind of gentleman who eats there because the food is predictable and the company acceptable. A plain ordinary. A room barely larger than a parlour, with 4 tables, benches rather than chairs, and a menu chalked on a board by the door. The menu is boiled beef and carrots, 18p, cold cuts and bread, 10p, soup, 4p, bread and cheese, 6p. These prices are not cheap in any absolute sense, but they are cheaper than cooking for yourself in lodgings where you have no kitchen, no fuel, no equipment, and no time. Which describes a significant number of the people eating in this room right now, journeymen and clerks and apprentices and single working women who live in single rooms and whose entire cooking infrastructure is a fireplace, a pot, and the will to use them after a working day. The boiled beef and carrots has an interesting quality. Mary notices you looking at it. Where do you think that beef came from? You look at the beef. Good enough quality. Not a joint from a nobleman's table. Not that fresh or that tender. But not the cheapest cut either. Wholesale, you say. Maybe. Some of it. But some of it comes from the gate. She means the gate economy. Houses that run a dinner every week, the cook sells off the surplus to the ordinaries. Not the best cuts. Those go to the regulars who come direct. The ordinaries take the pieces that nobody specific wants. She points to the cook's shop across the road. A different establishment from the ordinary. Not a sit-down place, but a shop where prepared food is sold to be taken away. Pies, cold meats wrapped in paper, small tubs of broth, a sign in the window, dripping, large pots 1 penny, small pots 1/2 penny. Where does she get the dripping from? 6 or 8 houses around Covent Garden and St. Martin's. Different cook sends around a boy on Friday morning. She buys it at bulk rate. You stand on the pavement and look at the cook's shop and think about this. The dripping that leaves Lord Ashworth's kitchen through the back gate, 1/2 penny pot at a time. Is that the end of it? Or does some of it travel further? Does a pot of Ashworth dripping end up on the shelf of this shop, resold to someone who buys in bulk for the frying? You don't know. But the possibility of it, the particular image of the dripping from the venison haunch, travelling 1/2 mile north and then 1/2 mile south in someone else's hands before it reaches the person who needs it, is something your mind does something interesting with. Not distressing, just large. The system is larger than the gate, larger than the kitchen, larger than any individual transaction within it. London feeds itself through hundreds of these systems running simultaneously. The gate economy is one of them. The ordinaries and the cook shops are others. The street sellers, the ones selling hot soup and fried fish and potatoes baked in the embers and small loaves from baskets, are others still. The charity dinners, the workhouse bread, the parish soup, all of them different in kind, different in dignity, different in what they cost and who they reach and who they exclude. None of them is sufficient alone. Together they constitute something that the people at the top of the system, the Lord Ashworths, eating their 40-cover dinners, have never needed to think about, and the people at the bottom, the girl in the shawl at the gate at midnight, cannot afford to not think about every single day. You stand on the pavement in the June sun and look at the cook's shop and feel the scale of it. Mary has moved on to the next stall, a woman selling watercress from a flat basket. Early summer watercress, the first good crop of it, bright and fresh. Watercress, she says. Yes, you say, and you buy a handful for a farthing and eat it standing on the pavement in June 1762 in the smell of London, and it tastes of cold water and iron and the particular freshness of things just out of the ground. The autumn of your second year comes in a different colour from the first. The first autumn, last year's November, your first gate duty, the cold and the lantern and the woman with the covered pot. That autumn was the autumn of learning, of not yet knowing where anything was. This autumn you know where things are, you know the gate, you know the regulars, you know which Tuesday surplus looks like a good week and which looks like a harder one. You know that the cracked jelly on the shelf is always yours to sell, and that the good jellies are not, and that this distinction is perfectly clear to Mrs. Hatch, and to you, and to no one else in the household, because no one else has reason to track such things. You know Mrs. Hatch better, not personally, not her history, not her family beyond Ruth, not the Bristol she came from or the kitchen she trained in before this one, but professionally. You know her timing. You know which issue she will intervene on and which she will leave for you to solve. You know the particular silence that means she is considering something, and the different particular silence that means she has already decided and is waiting for you to catch up. You know the kitchen's rhythms, the way Tuesday and Friday are different from Thursday, the way a family dinner requires different management than a dinner party. Not less work exactly, but differently distributed work. Less coordination required, but more attention to the details of a smaller table where every dish is noticed. The way a cold snap in October means an extra delivery of coal and a recalibration of how long things will keep in the cold larder. And you know the gate better, which means you know the system better, which means you understand something about the city that you did not understand when you arrived. On a Thursday evening in October, your second October in this house, you're at the gate as usual. The October air is cold but not frozen yet. The first hard frost is a week or two away. You can feel it in the quality of the cold, the way it has a different texture from summer cold, more serious, less negotiable. The woman who came on your first night, the one with the covered pot, the first customer you ever served, the one whose name you still don't know, who comes most Thursdays, arrives as usual. Later than usual tonight, closer to midnight, but she comes. She looks at the board. Mutton again tonight. There is almost always mutton. How much? You tell her. She pays. You wrap it. You add, without comment, the last of tonight's bread. She takes the bundle. She stands at the gate for a moment. Tonight something is different in her posture. Not anxious, not ill. Just changed somehow, in a way you can't immediately read. My daughter's been taken on, she says, unexpectedly. She's not someone who volunteers information. You've never heard her offer more than necessary. Oh? At a house on Davy Street, scullery maid. How old is she? 14. You were 15 when you arrived. This girl is 14, starting what you started. What's her name? Eliza. She'll be all right, you say, and you mean it the way it was meant to you, not as a promise, not as sentiment, but as an assessed probability, as a thing that has been measured by people who know what they're measuring and found to be the most likely outcome. The first winter's the hardest. After that your hands toughen. The woman looks at you. In the lamplight, her face is the particular face of a woman who has been managing the gap between what she has and what she needs for so long that the management has become as automatic as breathing, and who is briefly, in this moment, looking at something that gives her some different information about what the gap might contain. She nods. She takes her bundle. She goes back down the mews lane. You stand at the gate in the cold October air for the remaining time, watching the lane, and no one else comes, and the lantern burns down, and eventually you blow it out and fold the table and go inside. This is October in your second year. This is what it looks like. By November of the second year, your second November at the gate, your second winter of tallow on the knuckles, your second year of waking at 4 to the smell of coal and bones, you have been promoted. Not a large promotion. You're still not kitchen maid, but you're no longer purely scullery maid either. You are the one who manages the cold larder now, who tracks what is in it, what is aging, what needs to be used before it turns. You are the one Mrs. Hatch consults when she wants to know if there is enough of the Tuesday beef to stretch to Thursday without additional purchase, which is a form of trust that you do not take lightly. And on gate nights, you're now the one who trains the new girl. Her name is Polly. She's 14, from Essex, arrived in October with a letter of character and an expression of concentrated bewilderment that you remember from your own first weeks. She is going to be all right. You can tell this immediately. She has the right kind of practical attention, looking at how things are done before asking why they're done that way. On her first gate night, you stand beside her and you tell her what Mrs. Hatch told you, which is, use your judgment, and you tell her the things that Mrs. Hatch did not tell you, which are: the woman with the covered pot is a regular, always mutton if there is mutton, never needs to be asked what she wants. The coachman with the boy comes once a month and always wants dripping. The old man with the flat cap pays the exact right price every time, don't make him wait for change. And sometimes, near midnight, someone comes who doesn't know the system, and when that happens, you help them without making it a charity, because it is not a charity. It is the gate, and the gate is for everyone who comes to it. Polly listens. She writes nothing down. There is nothing to write. This is oral knowledge, passed from person to person, the way the whole system is passed, the way all the real knowledge of this kitchen is passed. She is at the gate the next Thursday on her own. You are in the kitchen, washing pots. Mrs. Hatch is nearby, working on a sauce, not looking at the kitchen door but aware of it, in the way she's aware of everything in her domain. She'll be all right, you say, not to Mrs. Hatch exactly, half to yourself. She will, says Mrs. Hatch, and keeps stirring the sauce. And so the gate keeps, and the kitchen keeps, and the system keeps, which is to say the arrangement between what a great house has and what the city outside it needs, keeps running quietly, invisibly, through the back gate and the mews lane and the streets beyond, through the covered pots and the flat baskets and the canvas bags, through the hands of everyone who knows where to come and when. Years pass in the way that years in service pass, which is to say, season by season, dinner party by dinner party, the gradual accumulation of knowledge that happens so slowly it becomes indistinguishable from simply being alive. You're 16, then 17. The 2nd October gives way to the 3rd November. The kitchen stays the same. You change. Let me tell you about an ordinary Thursday. Not a dinner party Thursday. An ordinary one, 2 years into your time here, after you've learned most of what can be learned from this particular kitchen. You wake at 4. The coal smell. Agnes has left. She was taken on as kitchen maid in a house near Sloane Square in the spring, A step up she's been ready for longer than she knew. The girl who shares the pallet with you now is called Joan, 15, from somewhere in Shropshire, and her breathing in sleep is different from Agnes's, lighter and faster, as if even sleep is a business she's conducting with efficiency. You wake Joan at 4. She wakes quickly now. That was not true in October, but it is true in November. The body has made its adjustment. The range, the coal, the bellows, the stock pot. Mrs. Hatch at 4:15. Oatmeal at 6. The day runs its course. On a non-dinner party Thursday, the kitchen produces the family's breakfast, the family's luncheon, the family's dinner, and the servants' meals around those. This sounds like less than a dinner party, and it is in quantity. But the quality of attention required is sometimes higher, because a small family dinner is seen more clearly than a table of 40. Lord Ashworth will notice if the sauce tastes different. Lady Ashworth will notice if the tart is overdone by 5 minutes. There is less cover in a small dinner. But there is also, on a non-dinner party Thursday, something that doesn't exist on a dinner party Thursday, a quiet hour in the afternoon. Not silence exactly. A kitchen is never silent, but a relative quiet that descends between the preparation of the family's luncheon and the beginning of the dinner preparations. An hour, sometimes 2, when the kitchen runs at a lower frequency. In this hour, Mrs. Hatch sits at the preparation table with a cup of tea and the household account book. The account book is not a secret document, but it is hers in a way that few things in the kitchen are simply hers, not the pots or the ingredients or the range or the house, all of which belong to Lord Ashworth. The account book is her working document. It is how she keeps track of what has been spent and what has come in, and how the kitchen's finances balance, which they do not always perfectly balance. And when they don't, she adjusts. She has never explained the account book to you. You have not been invited to look at it. But over 2 years of sitting in the same room with it, you have learned its dimensions by inference. You know that the household gives Mrs. Hatch a quarterly allowance for kitchen expenses, out of which she buys the ingredients and pays the kitchen boy and manages the coal. You know that her official wages are £18 a year. You know that the perquisites, the gate money, the bone money, the dripping money, the various other customary rights amount to something additional that is not recorded in the official accounts. You know that she sends money to Bristol, not regularly, not every month, but periodically when some need arises. You know this because once you came to the preparation table for something, and she was writing a letter, and there was a folded piece of paper beside her that you could see held coins. She folded the letter around the coins and sealed it before you got close enough to see the address. But she did not hide that she was sending something. She simply sealed it and put it in her apron pocket and went back to the account book. This is Mrs. Hatch, a woman with her own financial life, her own obligations, her own people in Bristol, who are connected to her through money that has to get there by letter, because she cannot go herself, or not often. Her world is this kitchen, and the life she has constructed from it, and the people she maintains with its output. You are, for these 3 years, part of the output of her world, not the most significant part, but a part she has invested in, which is visible in small things. The tallow cake on the accessible shelf, the gate training, the cold larder responsibility, the Tuesday afternoon errands to St. Giles. On an afternoon in your 3rd November, she says something direct to you for the first time in 3 years. You're at the preparation table, slicing onions for the dinner. She is at the account book. The kitchen is at its mid-afternoon quiet. Joan is in the scullery. James, still small but larger, is somewhere in the garden with a task. Mrs. Hatch says, without looking up from the account book, "What are you thinking about?" You consider this. It is not a question she's ever asked before. It is not a question that the kitchen usually asks. "I was thinking about the system," you say. "The gate. What about it?" "I was thinking about how old it is, the system, whether anyone set it up or whether it just happened." A pause. She turns a page of the account book. "It happened," she says, "the same way most things happen. People needed something and other people needed something else, and an arrangement got made and kept getting made." "Who were the first ones?" "No idea." A pause. "My mother was at a gate like this one. Her mother before that. Goes back further than anyone can say." You think about this. 3 generations of women at back gates, learning the regulars, adding the bread to the purchase without being asked, calling out to the girl at the end of the lane who doesn't know how to approach. "Will I run a gate eventually," you say, and then, more specifically, "Will I run one like this?" Mrs. Hatch looks up from the account book. This is the first time in the conversation she has looked directly at you. She looks at you for a moment. "You're going to be a cook," she says. Not a question, a statement of her assessment. The assessment of someone who has been watching you for 3 years with the same quality of attention she gives to a stock pot on the boil. I haven't studied." "You've been studying for 3 years. You just didn't know that's what you were doing." She returns to the account book. "You learn the sauce work this winter. In the spring I'll put you on pastry." A pause. "The gate, you already know." That is all she says. She returns to the accounts. You return to the onions. But your hands on the knife are different from what they were before she spoke. Something has shifted in the frame. The kitchen, which has been your world for 3 years, has become something else. Not just the place you live and work, but the place you're being trained. The distinction is small and enormous simultaneously. This is what it looks like when a cook decides to make another cook. Not a formal apprenticeship. There is nothing formal about it. No contract. No certificate. Just the gradual, deliberate extension of responsibility and knowledge conducted in the language of practical daily work, measured in saucepans and account books and gate evenings, rather than in any official currency. This is how the knowledge passes, person to person, kitchen to kitchen, generation to generation. The gate knowledge and the source knowledge and the knowledge of how to keep the gap managed. What is surplus and what is necessary, and how to stand between them and make something reasonable happen. You slice onions in the quiet kitchen in November of your 3rd year, and outside the small high windows the November light is grey and flat, and the coal smoke is rising from every chimney on the terrace, and Lord Ashworth is somewhere upstairs living his life, and in the mews lane behind the house Thursday night is coming on. There is something you think about in this kitchen, in this November, in these 3 years. You think about the woman in the pale green silk at the garden doorway in May. The 2 seconds of eye contact before she went around you, the way you did not register on her sightline in any meaningful sense. This is not a wound. It was not then, and it is not now. It is a fact about the structure of the world you both inhabit, which is to say, you do not exist in the same story. She is in one story, with a dining room in it, and a garden party, and green silk and pearl earrings. You're in another story, with a preparation table in it, and an account book and tallow cake on an accessible shelf. The stories share an address. They share a building. They are, in the most literal sense, the same location, but they face different directions. You have thought about this these 3 years, the way the city operates on its 2 levels, not exactly rich and poor, not exactly master and servant, but the seen and the unseen. The families upstairs who receive 40 guests for dinner and whose sightline does not include the kitchen. The kitchen that produces the dinner and whose sightline does not include the dining room except briefly, through a service door, for 3 seconds with the tureen. What you have understood, slowly and with the particular slowness of things, understood through experience rather than instruction, is this. The unseen level is not a lesser level. It is not the failure version or the background version of the real story. It is a complete world in itself, with its own expertise, its own economy, its own systems of knowledge and care and transmission. The gate is as complex as any counting house in the city. The below-stairs economy is as old and as functional as any market in London. The knowledge that passes from Mrs. Hatch to you, and from you to Polly, and from Polly to whoever comes after Polly, is as real as anything written in the official household accounts. It is just invisible, or not invisible exactly. Present and unlooked at. There is a difference. You carry this understanding around with you like the tallow cake in your apron pocket in winter. Not a heavy thing. Not something you carry with resentment or grief. Just something you carry, because knowing where you are is useful, and you have spent 3 years learning exactly where you are, and exactly what that means, and exactly what it is worth. It is worth a great deal. It is worth the system that runs behind the dining room. It is worth every pot of dripping and every bone and every piece of bread that found its way from the preparation table to the person who needed it, through the back gate and down the mews lane and into the covered pots and the canvas bags and the kitchen of the ordinary on the cook's row. It is worth Eliza on Davies Street who is learning the gate. It is worth the girl in the shawl in March who came back. She did come back the following Thursday, with a halfpenny this time, and she has been coming since. And who has been getting the end of the bread basket and a small pot of dripping for a halfpenny for 7 months. It is worth the sound of Agnes's breathing that first November, on the pallet in the scullery, before she grew up and moved to a better position. It is worth the moment Mrs. Hatch said, without looking up from the account book, "You're going to be a cook. Now let the kitchen quiet down. The range is still going. It will always be going. The coal burns at the rate of 4 scuttles a day in winter, and the coal dust settles on everything, and the smell of it is permanent, worked into the walls, worked into you. The stock pot is simmering. It has been simmering since 5 in the morning, when you put the fresh bones in with the water and the onion, and the few sprigs of dried thyme from the bunch hanging above the larder door. The stock is developing, which means it is doing the slow work of extracting from the bones and the vegetables everything they contain, concentrating it, building it into something that will give depth and body to this evening's sauces. This is what stock is, the process of extraction, the process of getting the last deepest thing out of the material available. You can't rush it. You can't explain to the stock why you need it done faster. You apply heat and time and you wait. The kitchen is warm now. The November cold is still at the windows, still pressing at the door to the mews lane, but the range has had 12 hours to push back against it, and the range is winning, the way it always wins by this hour, the kitchen maintaining its own temperature against the city outside. Joan is in the scullery, washing the afternoon pots, making the particular rhythmic sound of the pot brush against copper that you know so well you could probably reproduce it from memory in your sleep. Mrs. Hatch has gone upstairs. She does this occasionally in the late afternoon. A brief consultation with Lady Ashworth about next week's dinner plans, conducted in the housekeeper's room rather than the kitchen because Lady Ashworth does not come down to the kitchen. James is at the spit. You are at the preparation table with the onions. The kitchen is yours for this half hour, in the way that a place is yours when you know it completely and everyone in it is occupied and no one is asking you for anything. And the immediate task, the onions, is straightforward enough that your hands can manage it without your full attention. Your hands are different from what they were 3 Novembers ago. The cracks on the knuckles still come in winter. They will always come in winter. But the skin itself has changed. Tougher, less vulnerable to the cold water, the tallow having done its work over 3 years of daily application. You can hold a pot that came directly off the range now without the cloth. Not for long, not without risk, but for the 3 seconds needed to move it to the table. Your hands have learned the kitchen. This is what 3 years looks like. Not a completed thing, not an ending, but a different beginning. A beginning where you know what you're beginning from. The onions are done. You put them in the bowl. You take the bowl to the pot by the range and add them to the sauce base. The onions going in with the rendered butter and the stock reduction. The smell shifting as they hit the heat. The sharp, raw smell cooking off immediately into something sweeter and richer. You stir. You watch the surface. You wait. You stir and you wait. And the sauce does what sauces do when they are given the correct heat and the correct time and the correct attention, which is they deepen. The surface goes from the watery, slightly cloudy appearance of a new sauce to the thicker, more unified surface of a sauce that is beginning to become itself. The smell changes by gradations you have learned to read. The sharp edge of raw onion cooks entirely off. The stock reduction under it comes forward. The deep, almost meaty smell of bones given up into liquid. The butter, which has been holding the whole thing in suspension, stops smelling like butter separately and becomes part of the smell of the whole. This is what cooking is, at its foundation. The transformation of separate things into a unified thing that is better than any of its components individually. Not more expensive necessarily, not more complicated, just better. The particular kind of better that takes time to achieve and cannot be fabricated. You learned this from watching Mrs. Hatch for 3 years before she ever explained it. You learned it by watching the stock pot every morning, and the sauce pot in the afternoon, and the range itself, and the way she adjusted the heat without being asked. The way she moved the pot from the highest heat to the moderate heat to the lower heat as the sauce progressed. The way she tasted at different stages with a spoon that she kept clean for this purpose. You taste the sauce now with your clean spoon. It needs salt. It needs another 5 minutes. It needs nothing else. You add a pinch of salt. You put the spoon back. You wait. This is cooking. And this is the other side of the gate economy. Not the distribution of the surplus, but the making of the thing that creates the surplus. Not the bones going out to the mews lane, but the bones going into the stock pot in the first place. Not the bread basket at the gate, but the bread made in the morning in this kitchen by Mary's careful hands. Everything that leaves through the back gate was first made here by people who have been awake since 4 in the morning and who will not eat what they made. That is worth sitting with for a moment, not as a grievance. Just as a fact about this kitchen, and about all the kitchens like it, a fact that is so embedded in the structure of things that it barely seems like a fact at all. Just the way things are, just the given condition that everything else is built on. In 1762 in Mayfair, this is the given condition. In every year of every decade of every century of English domestic life before and since, this has been the given condition. The people who make the food and the people who eat it are different people. The people who prepare the abundance and the people who are given what remains of it are different people. The person who scrubs the copper pots and the person who eats the food served in those pots are different people, living different lives in the same building, breathing the same coal smoke. And the thing that runs in the gap between them, the gate economy, the system of customary rights and tacit arrangements and late-night transactions in mews lanes, that thing is the work of the people at the bottom of the system, not the people at the top. Lord Ashworth did not design the gate. Lord Ashworth has never thought about the gate. The gate is Mrs. Hatch's design, and before Mrs. Hatch's design, her mothers and her mothers' mothers, going back through kitchens and gates and back lanes in every city and town, where people have cooked for people who are richer than themselves, the sauce is ready. You take it off the heat. You move it to the corner of the range where it will stay warm but not cook further. You clean the preparation area. You lay out the board for the vegetables. Mrs. Hatch returns from upstairs. She comes into the kitchen, goes directly to the sauce, lifts the lid, holds her face above the steam for one breath, lowers the lid, moves on. She says nothing. This is approval. In Mrs. Hatch's vocabulary of response, silence about a sauce means the sauce is right. If it were wrong, you would know immediately. The evening advances. Dinner is prepared, served, eaten, cleared. The family's dinner tonight is small. Lord and Lady Ashworth and one guest, a man who eats with enthusiasm and compliments Mrs. Hatch through Thomas, who carries the compliment back downstairs with the slightly amused expression of a person who has been the compliment carrier many times and finds it somewhat theatrical but is not unkind about it. After the clearing, after the servant's supper, cold cuts, bread, the last of the cheese, a preserved plum tart that is not bad. The kitchen quiets. Joan finishes the pots. James has been sent to bed. Mrs. Hatch is at the account book for the final half hour of the evening, adding up the week. You sit on the stool by the scullery door with a cup of tea that has been stewing for too long, and is therefore stronger than is strictly pleasant but is warm, which is the most important thing at 11 o'clock on a November evening. This is what the end of the day looks like. Not dramatic, not even particularly comfortable. Just the kitchen coming down from its working pitch, the fires banking, the copper pots clean on their hooks, the preparation table scrubbed, the smell of the day's cooking settling into the walls where it will join the smell of all the other days. You think about your mother in Hertfordshire, taking in washing. You think about the 5 younger ones at home, who are each a year older than they were when you left. Your youngest brother is now 8. You have never met him, born after you came to London, known only through your mother's letters, written in her careful large hand, and sent through the postal system, and arriving crumpled and sometimes delayed, and always the same in their core content. Everyone is well. Your father is working. The winter was hard but manageable. How are you getting on? You are getting on. You write back when you can. You send home 2 shillings a quarter from your wages, which is almost half of what you earn, which your mother receives and which disappears into the family economy without comment except for a line in her next letter. Money received, thank you. This is what £5 10 shillings a year looks like from the outside, not a wage, a system. Part of it stays with you in the form of food and shelter and tallow on the accessible shelf. Part of it goes to Bristol, to Mrs. Hatch's people. Part of it goes to Hertfordshire, to yours. The kettle on the back grate has gone quiet. The main fire in the range is banked low for the night, enough heat to make the morning start up faster, but not burning through coal unnecessarily. The kitchen smell has shifted from the active cooking smell of daytime to the settled coal and tallow smell of evening, deeper and older, the smell of the kitchen existing rather than working. Mrs. Hatch closes the account book. She holds her back for a moment before she straightens, a movement she makes every night, the movement of a woman who's been on her feet for 19 hours and whose back knows it. "Good evening," she says, to the kitchen generally, to you specifically. "Good evening, Mrs. Hatch." She takes her candle and goes to bed. You sit for another few minutes with the stewing tea. Then you go to the scullery. Joan is already asleep, breathing light and fast. You lie down on your side of the pallet. The flagstone is as cold as ever through the straw. The coal smell is as present as ever. From outside, at the far edge of hearing, St. George's, Hanover Square is striking the hour. 11. The bells are heavy and measured and completely indifferent to the particulars of any individual evening. They have been striking the hour since 1724, and they will go on striking it long after everyone in this kitchen has moved on to other kitchens or other lives or no life at all. Listen to those bells. They are striking over Mayfair and over Oxford Street and over the Strand and over the river, over the cook shops and the ordinaries and the mews lanes and the back gates of every great house in the city, over the people at those gates tonight, carrying their covered pots, their canvas bags, their flat baskets, over the woman whose daughter has just taken her first position, over the girl in the shawl who comes on Thursdays, over the old man with the flat cap and the exact change, over the stock pot which never quite cools completely, over the preparation table worn down by 3 decades of use, over the tallow cake on the accessible shelf, over you. Let the bells be the last thing you hear for a moment. Let them go slow. They're not urgent now. They're just the clock of the city, marking time the way the city always marks it. Regardless of what is happening beneath them, regardless of who is awake and who is asleep, regardless of who is at the gate and who is in the dining room, regardless of whose story this is story is yours. The scullery maid story, the kitchen maid story, the beginning cook story, the story of 3 years in a Mayfair kitchen, waking at 4 to cold smell and bells and the cold flagstone floor, learning the gate and the sauce and the stock pot and the system that runs between plenty and need. It is not a dramatic story in the way that stories are usually expected to be dramatic. There is no single crisis, no single turning point that divides before from after. There is instead the accumulation of ordinary knowledge and ordinary care and ordinary early mornings, accumulating into something that is worth calling a life. The bells finish, 11 o'clock. Somewhere above you, Lord Ashworth is going to bed in a room with a fire in it. His wife is in her dressing room with her lady's maid unpinning her hair. The guest has called for his carriage and gone back to wherever he came from. The dining room is dark. Below you, in the city, thousands of people in their beds, or not yet in their beds. In the ordinaries, the last customers are finishing their broth. In the cook shops, the shutters are going up. In the mews lanes across Mayfair, the last gate lanterns are being blown out, the wooden tables folded back against the wall, the cash boxes taken inside. The gate keeps closing at the end of the night, and it keeps opening again the following Thursday. It will keep opening for as long as there are great houses on one side of the lane, and people who need what those great houses produce on the other. This is the arithmetic of it. Not simple, not fair, Not exactly, but persistent as hunger, as persistent as the knowledge of where to go and when, as persistent as the custom that has been running from gate to gate and kitchen to kitchen for longer than anyone can trace it. Let that persistence be what you rest in tonight. The kitchen is warm enough now. The range keeps the cold back. The coal smell is around you like a constant weather, familiar and specific and entirely the smell of this particular life. Your hands are on the edge of the pallet, your hands that know the stock pot and the sauce spoon and the gate table, and the weight of the covered pot when it comes back through the back gate empty, which is what it comes back as, which is the right ending for the evening, which means the system worked tonight the way it has worked every night you've been at this gate. The system worked. Let that be enough for right now. Breathe in, breathe out. The coal smell is steady. The kitchen smell under it is steady. The sound of the bells is gone now, the 11 strokes absorbed into the November night, and what remains is the quieter sound of the city at this hour, which is not silence. London is never silent, but a lower register. The sound of a city that is mostly, for now, asleep. Feel the pallet under you. 3 inches of straw, same as it always was. The flagstone through it, same as ever. Your body knows this surface now. The body adapts to what it is given. This is not a comfort exactly, but it is not a suffering either. It is the simple fact of where you are. You're in a kitchen in Mayfair. You've been here 3 years. You've learned the stock pot and the sauce and the gate and the account book and the tallow cake and the old man with the flat cap and the woman with the covered pot and the girl in the shawl and the look on Mrs. Hatch's face when a sauce is right and the feel of the flagstone floor at 4 in the morning when the cold hits your bare feet and says, "Move!" You have learned all of this. You're carrying all of it. It is not a small thing to carry. Let the weight of it settle. Let the range keep doing what it does, which is hold the warmth, which is exactly what is needed in November, which is exactly what this kitchen has been doing for 30 years, and will keep doing after you have moved to another kitchen, after Mrs. Hatch has retired to Bristol, after Lord Ashworth has sold the house or died in it, or had it passed to someone else's name. The warmth stays, the knowledge stays. The gate keeps opening. That is what this is. That is what all of this is. The bones give up their goodness to the water becomes the stock becomes the sauce goes upstairs to the dining room, the bones come back down and go out the back gate. That's the whole story. From bones to sauce to bones. From the dining room to the Mews Lane. From Lord Ashworth's table to the covered pot of the woman with the careful face who comes every Thursday. It goes round. It always goes round. Let it go round without you for a while. Let your breathing slow. You're 15 in November 1762. You're 16 in the spring. You're 17 in October. You're learning the gate, the sauce, the stock pot, the way the light comes through the high kitchen windows in June, and is different from the light in November. You are carrying the tallow cake in your apron pocket and writing home to Hertfordshire, and standing on Westminster Bridge in the December cold and watching the coal barges on the Thames. All of that is real. All of that happened. All of that will always have happened, which is the strange permanence of the past, that it cannot be undone, that every moment that has always been and will always have been, which is a form of keeping that is different from memory but related to it. The Thursday gate, the covered pots, the woman whose daughter is now on Davy Street learning the same lane at a different address, the girl in the shawl, the old man, the coachman's boy looking at the pie, the stock pot simmering in the dark, the tallow cake, Mrs. Hatch at the account book. You're going to be a cook. Let that be the last thing. Let the kitchen settle around it. Let the coal keep burning at the back rate, the slow burn of a banked fire that is holding rather than working. Let the smell of it be the smell you fall asleep into, because that is what it is. The smell of this life, the smell of this kitchen, the smell of what this city is built from at its unseen level. Coal and tallow and bones and bread, and the particular richness of dripping from a well-run roast. The smell of work done, the smell of the gate closed for the night, the smell of the covered pots making their way through the dark streets of November London to wherever they're going. Where they're going is a kitchen smaller than this one. Where they're going is a pot on a fire that isn't as reliable as the range on South Audley Street. Where they're going is a family that needed this and got it. That's where the venison haunch went. That's where the bones went. That's where the bread in the flat basket went, one piece at a time, into the hands of the people who came to the gate and knew to come and came anyway. Good. That's good. Let the gate be closed for the night, and let it be good that it opened. Let the kitchen be still. Let November be November, cold and particular and here. Let the bells have stopped. Let your breathing be the only sound, in and out. The flagstone is cold, and the straw is thin, and the coal smell is in your hair, and you are 15 and learning, and the gate opened tonight, and it will open again next Thursday. That's enough. That is more than enough. Good night.